Notre Dame fans, welcome back to a special edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. Tonight, we are going to talk about the pending decision of Braylon James, who today announced the final three of Notre Dame, TCU, and Stanford. Also looked very, very heavily at programs like Texas and LSU, but it's a situation where Notre Dame has really been charging hard on him for a while. So before the show starts, I want to kind of let everybody know the times tonight. So Braylon is set to make his decision around 7:30. So that's why we are coming on a little early so we can kind of lead into it. Okay. So his decision will happen around 7:30. Knowing CBS Sports, it probably won't happen right at 7:30. They got to get their talking heads and their commercials and all that kind of stuff, which I'm cool with. You got to pay the bills, baby, right? It's all good. So, but that'll be the reality. But until then, we're going to kind of talk about why this is an important recruitment for Notre Dame. Why Notre Dame needs tonight to go well for them. We'll talk about Braylon as a player. We'll talk about his recruitment. We'll talk about a lot of different things. Then we will carry his announcement. The plan is to carry his announcement. We should be able to make that happen. We've tested everything out beforehand to make sure everything was working. And so, we'll kind of get it rolling then. And then as we kind of dive into the post, commitment discussion, we'll talk about what it means for Notre Dame one way or the other. We'll have some special guests on and do all those type of things, Ryan. But let's first set the stage, Ryan. I believe that there's some discussion of why this is a big recruitment for Notre Dame. The obvious ones are, okay, he's a top 100 player. ESPN just jumped him. So he's gone up in the rankings recently. On3 Sports did a new release of their rankings, which I'm still trying to figure out what is new since they did the last one like a month ago.
Yep.
But it worked out well for some Notre Dame guys, right? And some Notre Dame targets. Dante Moore went from 49 to 45. And I think, Don Schuler went up a spot and a couple guys dropped a couple spots. But Braylon James is a kid who jumped up like 20 spots. He was 267, jumped up to 246, I believe. So he's a guy that went up a little bit. ESPN recently also did a rankings update. Theirs had been a while. They jumped him up from 67 to 46.
Wow.
So ESPN now ranks him as a top 50 recruit. 247 Sports has him still in the 120 range, but he is number 72 to them on the composite list. So that is kind of where he's from recruiting. So obviously, Ryan, the first thing is, okay, big-time recruit. It's nice to get guys like that. But the bigger focus for me isn't so much on the ranking, Ryan. It is Braylon plays a position of very important need. The board for Notre Dame receiver is actually kind of small when you consider the numbers they need to get in this class, meaning there's probably, I'd say, 7 or 8 legitimate receiver targets on the board. They got to get 4, right? And when we talk about, we're talking Ronan Hannafin, we count as a receiver target. We're talking about some guys like that. But he is one of the guys that is obviously at the top of the board. He is a must-get grade A player, and they're going to find out tonight if they're able to get on the board. But receiver is such an important position for Notre Dame in this class, Ryan. They have to do well. And I see all the people in the chat asking if you own any Irish Breakdown gear. Yes, he does. But Ryan is traveling to South Bend tomorrow, and so all his Irish Breakdown gear is packed.
I got the hat on, though. I got the hat on.
You can't really see it,
I know. I get it.
We'll get you an Irish Breakdown hat that has like a logo right there, so people know. So that's why Ryan, I gotta get him some more gear. It's a process, everybody, but we'll get him some more gear. But I don't really care as much about the gear. I care about the content, and Ryan provides great content. And speaking of Ryan, what are we talking about? The receiver is an important player, and when one of your top of the board guys commits, I mean, if you're going to get to that next level and close the gap, you got to land those type of guys. And to me, Braylon James is that kind of guy.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of layers to why it's important. I mean, just from a structural perspective, I mean, after the 2022 season, you're talking about guys like Braden Lindsey being out of eligibility, Avery Davis, who's coming into his 6th year. You're talking about Joe Wilkins Jr. is most likely going to be out the door, right? So you're going to be losing at minimum 3 wide receivers, and who knows what's going to happen, transfer portal, all that conversation, like you never do know with those obviously next steps. So I think that the need is obvious on the roster. Getting a top 100 player, like you said, is paramount. You need to be able to get those types of players. And I really do think that this is a big boost if Notre Dame is able to land Braylon James here in a little bit, because Chancey Stucky comes from Baylor. A lot of question marks, obviously, as a new wide receiver coach. You hear a lot of great things about him on the trail, even though he has very limited experience as a recruiter. But obviously, no one's off the board yet, right? Like, you need to be able to land someone to really to take that to the next step and to make it tangibly into a real conversation. So,
right. Like, the board's impressive, right? Like, it's an impressive board,
extremely.
but it's like none of them have ND next to their name. So it's
exactly.
Like, at some point in time, you got to get on the board at some point in time. Let's talk about why that matters too, Ryan, why at some point in time you get off the board, because right now, all the recruits know Notre Dame needs minimum 3 to 4 receivers in this class. And if there's nobody on the board, there's no rush for anyone that wants to be in the class but wants to go through the recruiting process to jump on board, right? It's like, you got 4 spots open, coach. Like, I'm good.
Yep.
You start getting guys in that class, and all of a sudden, like, okay, if you want to be part of this thing, you need to make a decision here. So I think that's another reason why this isn't. I mean, there's just so many layers to why at some point in time they get on the board. And look, let's be honest too. This is going to be the first time in 2020 in the 2023 class, if they're able to get Braylon and some other decisions, that as excited as we are about the new staff, none of the new coaches have landed a recruit yet, because Marcus Freeman is the primary reason they got press and center. They hadn't even hired Al Golden yet. Right. And Peyton Bowen committed before this new staff was put together. And obviously his coach has been here. So, obviously Dylan McCullough was able to get on the board in 2022 with Jabron Payne. But, at some point in time, these coaches that we laud as great recruiters, which we think they are, you got to get on the board at some point in time. Right. And
exactly,
that's another reason why this is an important one for Notre Dame.
And another reason, too, is the fact that, Chancey Stucky obviously has a little bit of an inside track coming from the state of Texas to get into the fold with a guy like a Braylon James, a Texas product. And we've talked a ton about Notre Dame needs to start really hitting the state of Texas just in general, right? Like, that's one of the paramount states where you need to get a couple players each year, because obviously, you don't have to go through the list to understand that Texas is a great producer of talent. Like, it's just very obvious. You don't have to have a great eye or a great understanding to know what they do as producers. So you have to tap into there. And Coach Stucky has a little bit of an inside track again. He had immediate conversation. Obviously, Braylon James was on the board before he showed up, but things escalated very quickly after he was hired. So This is a paramount one for a lot of different reasons: where he's coming from, the position he plays, the caliber of player, a lot of different layers to this recruitment, like you said.
I think the Chancey Stucky piece was important. It's the only reason Notre Dame's even in this conversation, in my opinion, because I was talking to John Garcia earlier tonight. We were talking about Braylon's recruitment, and early on, Ohio State was the team to beat. And then as Braylon, and this was like way a long time ago when Ohio State offered, and then Braylon kind of reshifted his focus of what he was looking for, and that's when Stanford kind of started to climb, because he realized, like, yeah, football's like, when you're a sophomore and Ohio State offers and you're a receiver, you're like, I'm going to Ohio State, right? And especially as you kind of see what Garrett Wilson had done at the time. Garrett Wilson, I believe, was a freshman at Ohio State when, and you saw what he's done, and they had landed some other kids from Texas and all that. So you kind of see it, and then it's like the recruitment shifts and all that. And Notre Dame the whole time is just plotting, as they have done with just about every other big-time recruit under the previous regime, and offered him and occasionally talked to him, but there was like no relationship whatsoever. And the whole time, Chancey Stucky is recruiting him at Baylor. And I had a very interesting conversation with a recruit about 3 years ago, and he was being recruited by Iowa State. And I remember talking to his dad, and his dad said, if Matt Campbell was at a bigger school, my kid would be going to where Matt Campbell was coaching. And I thought that was because it doesn't matter. Sometimes with some big-time kids, it doesn't matter how much they love you. You're at Iowa State. You're at Baylor, right? Now, it doesn't matter how good Baylor is. It's still Baylor, right? And then when you consider that Braylon has kind of adopted this I want to get away from home mentality, there was no way Coach Stucky was going to get him, despite the fact they had really connected. So when with a lot of these kids we've talked about, like with Cardinal Tate, some of these other kind of kids, the new staff has had to overcome some of the mistakes of the previous staff. And you're doing that sort of in a fresh standpoint. That's not the case here, because Chancey Stucky was at a new school, but the relationship had already been there, and it was a school that I think that Braylon had always had some interest in, but they just didn't show him the love like the other schools did. So I think that can't be that role of Chancey Stucky if Braylon were to make the decision for Notre Dame tonight. That's going to be I mean, you can't just chalk it up to, well, he's just here and anyone could have got him like some other kids. This is a Chancey Stucky recruitment in a lot of ways. And I think that's another important thing, which is why I emphasize the new staff's going to kind of get on the board finally when it comes to landing a recruit and doing it in big time fashion if they're able to get Braylon in the class.
And it's just such an easy fit from just a personal perspective, right? I mean, he literally posts on his profile, Braylon James speaking, 5.34 GPA. Like, he is a high academic kid.
And that's a 5.0 scale, but
right,
like that's still above a 5.0.
Exactly. Like, it's just insane. How, I mean, obviously he's a high academic kid, and also he's so thought provoking that he doesn't care about staying in Texas, you know? Like, I mean, the fact that Stanford is among the finalists for Notre Dame, I think that speaks paramount to like where the priorities are for a guy like a Braylon James. And when you have a high academic kid who isn't stuck on I need to stay in state and I need to do all that type of thing, I'm okay with expanding and going to a different environment, a different region. You need to land that type of kid, especially when he's a top 100 wide receiver. You know what I mean? Like, there's very little excuse from a personal perspective combined with a football playing perspective not to get a Braylon James if you're Notre Dame. Like, you have to be able to close in this kid, and we'll see if they did very soon.
Did you hear the video he put out? Was it yesterday about his commitment? Did you listen to it? Okay, we're going to play that for people because, Ryan, it speaks to kind of what you were talking about. This is a different kind of kid. And I want to share this with people because I didn't listen to it at first because we already kind of knew he was going to commit tonight, and I watched it late last night, and I want people to listen to this. So just give me a second because it takes a second to get these things up there. I got to get rid of some other Twitter things to make sure that I'm bringing up the right thing. So just give me a second. But
and I think you're a big Twitter guy, so there's a lot of tabs open, I'm sure.
No, I'll explain afterwards why there's so many different tabs open, but it's not it. Yeah, you know me. I love the sarcasm behind that tweet. For people who don't know, Ryan's being super sarcastic right now. All right, let's find out. So I just want to pull this up because I have to do this in order to make sure that there is sound. So just give me 1 second here. Nope, that's not it. I'm going to find this. Why can I not find this? Because this is really good. Okay, give me a second, everybody. Oh, I get what it is because it's on Safari and it's not on Chrome. So I just got to pull it up on Chrome. So give me a second. It's going to be worth the wait. I promise you. Those of you who have never heard Braylon talk or never kind of heard, because Ryan, what was the comment you said about him? You said he's what?
Thought-provoking.
Thought-provoking. Yes. Yeah. You're this. As soon as you said that, I started thinking of this video. So I've got it up now. I figured out what the problem was because I just got to make sure that there's sound. It's just not your normal share screen. So I'm gonna share this, everybody. So make sure your sound's up. If you can't hear it, everybody, let me know, and I'll make sure the sound. But I think I got the sound on here real quick. Okay.
First, I want to say thank you.
Can y'all hear it?
For giving me something to fall in love with. I want to say thank you for providing me with opportunity. And lastly, I want to say thank you for giving me an identity. To the 9 a.m. flag football games on Saturday mornings, to the 6 a.m. high school lifts, you show me that nothing in this life is received without working for it. Throughout this whole journey, all I've wanted to do was impact my city. And I hope that as I continue down this long road of success God has laid out for me, I continue to do so. The first time I touched the laces on that ball, I knew this would be the path for me. I put my head down and stayed humble and achieved everything the younger me said I could. Now that all these blessings have fell into my lap, it's come down for the time to make a decision that will impact the rest of my life. With that being said, I'll be announcing my commitment April 19th.
I don't got a problem. And if I did, money could solve them. Keep thumbing the hundreds and comments, and I go spin a check right on my.
Okay, I gotta stop it there because with the music on, we'll get demonetized for having that song we have a commitment to. But he doesn't talk afterward the rest of the way. But I think that right there, when you listen to that, that's just his "I'm gonna make a commitment" video, right? Like that's not even like his commitment video. And when you listen to him explain to Brian Smith, and that's how we first heard about him wanting to go away from school, was he was talking to Brian Smith, who was in Texas watching him at an event. And Brian sent us the audio, and we both got to listen to it. And you're like, I wish I was this mature when I was 25, much less 17. You know what I mean? And he's just a really sharp kid, thoughtful kid, hardworking kid. And it's like, this is a Notre Dame kid, right? And so I just, when you talk about the academics, the talent, the personality, it's like, you've got to get this. There's no excuse not to get this, which then kind of ticks me off because then I start thinking about how was the previous staff not recruiting this kid harder, right? The whole shopping down a different aisle. This is exactly the kind of kid that should be in that aisle. But that's a different conversation for a different day. Unfortunately, this staff spent more time on him. So really, really unique kid. And I've had a chance to kind of talk to his dad a little bit too. And it doesn't take long. Like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Right. Like when you meet the kid first, and then you meet the parents, you're like, yeah, okay, I get it now. Right. Like makes sense. Right. And that's Braylon. I mean, that's who he is. So it doesn't take a whole lot, Ryan. But yeah, you said he's a very, very, like you said, thought-provoking, sharp kind of kid that's going to come to Notre Dame and thrive because he wants that challenge. That's the thing, is if he picks Notre Dame, it's like, he's going to be okay going away from home because he said he wants to go away from home. He's going to be able to handle the academics because he wants the academic challenge. That's why Stanford was considered his leader at one point in time. And, really, really unique kid, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, that was my first time seeing that video, obviously. That gave me a little bit of goosebumps, man. He's a really well-spoken kid, for was he probably 16 or 17 years old
17,
right now?
Yeah, probably 17, yeah.
Yeah, I think that speaks paramount. That's why I think the fit makes so much sense if it does happen, right? And the fact of the matter is, Notre Dame and Stanford are in his top 3, and obviously that says a lot about the kid. Yeah, right. And he's from Texas. Right. Yeah,
right.
So the kid seems just like a special person outside of his talent level. And we've talked about it, Brian. It's like, he tested in the 4.4s, had like a 35-inch. Like, this is a special athlete, man. 38 inch, yeah.
Because I actually was talking about that today, and he ran a 4.4. This is electronically timed at a spring event. Ran a 4.47. Mm-hmm. He checked in over 180 pounds. Had a 38.4-inch vertical jump. Had a 130-inch broad jump, and ran a 4.47. as a junior in high school. And then I asked a friend of mine who is a track coach back in Virginia. I said, hey, is a 13.9 good in the 110-meter hurdles? He's like, well, what age? Junior in high school? He's like, yeah. He's like, that's really good. And I saw a video of it, and just like how graceful he was getting over. It's like, this is an athletic kid. This isn't just a straight line fast kid. This is a kid that's got some – you can't do hurdles if you don't have some coordination and some flexibility and some ability to lift and bend. And so he's a really unique kid, Ryan. Very talented kid for sure as well.
Yeah. I'm a weirdo with the track times, man. 13.9 is flying. That is a great time.
Right. And part of it was he had a kid right in a lane next to him, or a lane or two over, that was kind of with him the whole time. And I always feel like you're always going to get your best times when there's someone challenging you. Right. And he did that. He actually kicked over one of the good Lord, why am I drawing a blank, Ryan? Hurdles.
The hurdles. Yeah. You're talking about the 110 high hurdles.
Yeah. He over one of them like midway through, which is obviously going to slow your time down a little bit. So he's an athlete. And this is what I've talked about in the past, Ryan, is I've always felt there was a speed element there to him that he hadn't tapped into yet on the football field. And we're starting to see it kind of come out a little bit here as he gets into track season. And I think we're going to see that really take off here in the fall. And look, as we kind of look at the schools he was after, that's why Georgia offered him and wanted him. That's why LSU offered him and got him on campus. That's why Ohio State offered him. That's why Notre Dame, the new staff that knows what they're doing, went after him so hard. That there's a lot of schools. There's a lot more schools that wanted him that he didn't have a lot of interest in. Georgia tried to make a run at him, and he wasn't interested because there's certain things he's looking for in a school that, I don't know a program like that necessarily can offer him.
Right.
And it's really interesting. The whole thing is interesting. And I think really the final five that I heard were the group that I felt kind of were. I thought A&M was a little bit more in it than TCU, but he put TCU as kind of his final three. But it was Notre Dame, Stanford, Texas, LSU, and I thought Texas A&M, but in fact he put TCU in there. So that was kind of the group that it came down to. Even though he had a top nine that also included it was like Georgia was in the top nine, TCU and Texas A&M. I look at some of those other schools, but it was a really, really impressive offer list. And we're gonna watch a little film here, Ryan. I've got the CBS Sports stream up, so I'll kind of see when that's coming up. But I want to dive into some film here before we get rocking and rolling. But we did have a couple super chats I wanted to bring up first. K Grant, my guy, let's get it. All right, appreciate that, buddy. Very, very much. Very much. People are fired up. Edwin Hooten says joined a few weeks ago. First chat. Edwin, thank you very, 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 very much. Hopefully you enjoy this. It's a good. I think this is going to, we'll find out what happens, but I think this is going to end up being a pretty good one to be your first one. And we'll get into Corey D. I see your super chat, buddy. We appreciate it. We'll answer that one here in a little bit. I think we'll probably wait till after the commitment to dive into that question, but we did get it. We do appreciate it. So let's bring up some film, Ryan, and I want to start off actually with his sophomore film because I just want to kind of see it all, right? We want to share a little bit of everything with everybody. So let's dive into some film here. You guys don't need to look at us while we're talking film, so we're gonna get down to this right here. So let's get to Braylon's film and make sure that everything is all set. We're all set. So let's watch some film of Braylon James from his sophomore season, and I think. Reason I wanted to bring this up is because he got thrown a lot more balls like this as a sophomore, Ryan, than he did even as a junior. Yep. And so you really see his ball skills and his body control and his length even more so as a sophomore than you did as a junior when he was, 170 pounds. And you can see the speed hasn't quite kind of caught up yet, but I really like the ball skills that I saw from him as a sophomore. And that's why I wanted to kind of get some of this film out. Again, just so people know, this is sophomore film of Braylon James that we're looking at here, not junior film. So let's chat a little bit about him, Ryan.
I think the first thing that pops, and I think it was the first thing I ever said to you about Braylon James, is he's springy, man. Like he elevates quickly, and he's just very the word that comes to mind in the 38-inch vert makes total sense that he was verified with. Like he's just a explosive kid, both explosive as far as a jumper, and then I thought off the line of scrimmage, he really gets on top of defensive backs quick. His speed is even a little deceptive to me, but like I think that off the line, he is incredibly explosive. He puts defensive backs in some bad positions pretty quickly.
Yeah, and again, this is sophomore film. I think we actually see a little bit more of the nuance of the position, a little bit more as a sophomore. And again, sometimes that's the nature of did you have a different quarterback? There's all types of things that you're going to go into it. I love how he snatches the ball out of the air there, shows great body control to get a foot down. This is impressive. One of the things that hurts him, I think, from a ranking standpoint, Ryan, is he doesn't have a lot of production compared to other top receivers because of the high school he plays at and the offense, and they're not good. I mean, the high school he plays at, they're not good. Mm-hmm. And he had, I think, 442 yards as a sophomore. He had he had barely 1,000 yards the last couple of years. Like I think he's just a touch over 1,000 yards the last couple of years. So the production's not there to just really jump out at you and be like, wow. But you see the traits and the tools, and it's like that's just not a lot of better kids on the board, in my opinion, than this.
And I think Colin just said it perfectly in the chat. He says he goes up and gets the ball, doesn't wait for it. He's an aggressive ball catcher. Like he goes up and he catches at the highest point. If he's a really good basketball player, I'd be like, yep, I totally get it, because that's just how he plays the game. He's just really fluid and really explosive with everything he does.
Yeah, and he does play basketball. He also runs track for his high school team. I think he's running track for Stony Point now. So I believe that transfer's happened, but I'm not 100% certain on that, Ryan. I could be wrong.
Yeah, last time I talked to the coach at Del Val, he said that he had made the transfer already, so he is back home, like you said, at Stony Point.
Okay. Now that's where he played as a freshman in high school, so that's where he started. Then he transferred to Del Val, and then transferred obviously back to Stony Point for his senior year. So I like these. He's got a couple blocking things on there, which I like.
Oh, you gotta love it. You gotta love it, man.
Yep.
I just love his frame, Brian. Like someone asked, is he 6'1"? Is he 6'4"? I'd say he's somewhere 6'2" to 6'3", but he's long, man. He is long everywhere.
Right. That's the thing is we've talked about this. Length is more important than height.
Yep.
You know, it just is. And he's a kid that's got really good length. He's checked. I've seen places where he's checked in at 6'2", places he's checked in at 6'3". He was originally listed as 6'4", but as we kind of did some more digging, it was like, no, he's not 6'4". So we changed him on our board down to 6'3". So here's some junior film. Let's pop up some junior film. All right, we got a super chat here before we do that. William Chesney, thank you for that, William. Very, very, very much. Hey, IB, finally catching you guys for a live chat from Central Pennsylvania, a lifelong Irish fan. Who do you guys think are behind-the-scene wide receiver recruits, kind of like Michael Bell was at cornerback? Well, I think we have a couple ideas on that, William, and we'll chat about those because what we'll do after we discuss this is sort of what's next for Notre Dame. We'll have that after his announcement, which is going to be coming up here very soon. They're kind of they're talking about it now at on CBS Sports. They're kind of showing stuff of him, so we'll get to that here soon. But let's pull up some of this junior film here real quick and just watch a little bit of Braylon from his junior season. And this is where you start to see he's a little bigger, right? And he's got a little bit more actually, hold on, here we go. So let's do this. Hold on, everybody.
You know, just having the opportunity
Can everybody hear
college
that?
football at the next level isn't giving it many athletes. So, you know, just being able to, you know, chase my dreams and live out everything I said I could is just an honor. So I'm truly thankful to be in this position right now.
That's a beautiful perspective you have. And, you know, a lot of folks think 42 offers, top tier programs, nothing but sunshine and celebration. But this process, I'm sure it's taking you through a wide range of emotions. Can you give us an idea of what you're feeling right now in this moment?
I mean, like right now I'm feeling really nervous if I'm being honest with you. But, you know, like aside from that, like, yeah, it's truthfully just been, you know, just breathtaking, you know, just to see how many people are backing me, see how many people are supporting me. And, you know, just like I said, being able to live out my dream. So, you know, honestly, this whole recruitment has been a whirlwind. So, you know, like I said, I'm just excited to have experienced this whole entire process. It started for me 3 years ago. You know, some people don't get the opportunity to be in this, you know, position this long. So just for me having the opportunity to go out, you know, just continue to do what I do is an honor. So like I said, it's truthfully exciting.
Well, soak in that excitement for a little while longer. We're going to do away with those nerves, but not just yet. Need you to sit tight for a few. We're going to make it official in just a couple of minutes here. Taking a look at that 2023.
That's what they always do.
What a tease, man. What a tease.
Yeah, that's what they always do. So, oh, goodness gracious. You got to love it. I said, you got to get the advertising in and all that. We completely understand. We'll pull that thing back up when he's ready to rock and roll. So we'll still have that.
Well, we did have a super chat from David Freeman or Fryman. And apologize, David, if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Shout out Brian, Vince, and Ryan. Just wanted to say appreciate you guys and keep rolling the film. Go Irish. Appreciate you, David. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's get to some of these questions. Obviously, we have some super chats, but just some of these questions about him as a player, Ryan. And we'll pop in the film, obviously, as we kind of get going. People are excited about being part of this. Here's an interesting one, Ryan, that I wanted to ask you about because we had some people talking about comps, and this is an interesting one. Steve H said super high on Braylon James, has potential to be elite. Kind of reminds me of Kevin Austin. I thought that was an interesting one.
Yeah, we also had someone, I think it was Joseph I was pulling up now. He said, would you compare Braylon James to Kevin Austin? What about Julio Jones? I think the guy that I compared him to, Brian, and I know we talked a little bit about this one time, but I think Des Bryant when I see him. I don't know if it's like the Texas combination or what it might be, obviously, with playing with the Dallas Cowboys. But I see a frame with Braylon James where I think he's going to play between like 215, ish, 210, 215 at 6'2", 6'3". And I think he's just really springy. And I think the one thing that people underestimate about Dez is Dez was explosive, man. If you watch him at Oklahoma State, he was a dynamic punt returner. He was actually a dynamic punt returner as a rookie with the Dallas Cowboys as well. So I think explosive. I think winning above the rim, and I believe physicality when I think of Braylon James. So that's just the name that kind of comes to mind for me is Des
Here
Bryant.
we go. Got to unmute it. Oh, no, they're not back yet. Those teases, I tell you what. Okay, so Des Bryant I didn't see in high school, so it's hard for me to make that comp. I think you're projecting what he could be in college, and if he's like what Des Bryant was in college, then you got yourself a heck of a player. As a player, if he's like what Des Bryant was like as a player, then I'll be happy. Maybe some of the other things I don't like. I don't know if I have a good comp for this one, to be honest with you. And the Julio Jones comp doesn't work because he's not as big as Julio. Julio was legit 6'4", creeping up on 200 pounds as a senior. Like he was a much bigger athlete. I think if because that was to me still the greatest receiver class I've seen. And you had Julio Jones, AJ Green, Michael Floyd, DeVere Posey, Dan Buckner, Jonathan Baldwin, Justin Blackman. That was an absurd receiver class.
Oh man, I forgot about Justin Blackman.
Yeah,
what a waste of talent.
Yeah, I mean,
man.
there was a ton. There was a kid in that class that ended up not panning out because of injuries, but he had a great first year. A kid named DeAndre Brown that went to Southern Miss because he had some academic issues.
I remember DeAndre. Yeah.
He was a freak. He had like 1,000 yards as a rookie at Southern Miss, and then like shattered his leg as a sophomore. Was just never the same player.
Huge, right? Like 6'6" or something, right?
Yes. He was a stud. That was a great receiver. If there was a player in that class that I would probably compare Braylon James to as a player, it would probably be AJ Green stylistically. I think is who I would probably compare him to more than the other guys. If we were going to look at that class, just tall, skinny, long strider, speed is a little bit more deceptive than you think. I think Braylon's back up to it now, so let's get rocking and rolling. Maybe we'll actually get it this time.
Let the fans know where you'll be playing your ball.
Well, first off, I just want to give a thanks to my Lord and Savior for giving me the abilities to accomplish everything I believe I could. Secondly, I like to give a thanks to every Little League organization that coached me up from a young age and instilled the confidence in me to go out and become not just the athlete, but the young man that I aspire to be. From Dom and Jason Brosy's flag football teams to, Fusion Track and Field, the Wilco Tigers, Thunderbolts Track and Field Club, Juice 7v7, and lastly, the whole ATX Future organization. Next, I'd like to give a shout out to my middle school and high school coaches from Coach Gabbard, Saunders, Herrera, Page, Acosta, Burton, Lou, Chester, Mossick, Alexander, Coach Creek, Coach Leday, and Coach Shabach, along with a handful of more, along with all of my trainers from Margin Hooks, Derek Lewis, Sean Rutherford, Coach Bam, D. Bradfield in Sacrifice Training. Next, I'd like to give a thanks to all of my teammates from Stony Point to Del Valley. Truthfully, without y'all's brotherhood and our bond, I wouldn't be able to be in this position. So, I want to let it be known that I love you all. So I'm super thankful for y'all. And I just want to give a shout out to everybody here, just supporting me and, being a part of my community and just following my journey is truthfully an honor. So I'm truly thankful for that from all the teachers and, family members and church members. It means a lot to me. And lastly, I'd like to give a thanks to all my family from the 504 all the way down to the 512. I know y'all are watching me, so I love you all. Mom, Dad, Kyra, Nana, Uncle B, and Papa. I'm just truly thankful for y'all pushing me athletically and academically to be here. So with all that being said, I'd like to dedicate this commitment to my late cousin, Willie Simmons III, who passed away a year ago yesterday. So this whole journey's really been a tribute to him. So with that being said, for the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be taking my talents too. Even though LSU will always have a special place in my heart, that would not be the home for me. So with that being said, I'll be going to the University of Notre Dame.
He had to hit him with the head fake. But it's waking up the echoes. We are ND for Braylon James. Congratulations. A couple questions here.
Thank you.
Much was made about the transition at the top of that program. What about Coach Freeman, Coach Reese's recruiting pitch made South Bend feel like the place for you?
Obviously just looking at Notre Dame as an institution, in a whole, football is going to end one day. So obviously the degree speaks for itself. And, obviously Stanford could compete in that arena as well. But being able to play at the highest level of football and compete academically is super special. So, obviously that was, just one and all. But in terms of recruiting pitch, all they really did was just get to know me, just sitting down and getting to know who somebody truly is something not a lot of coaches do. But I felt like everything there was genuine, from Coach Stucky to Coach Reese all the way up to Coach Freeman. It was genuine love, and yeah, it was real. It was real.
High character individuals all over the place there on campus at South Bend. You have balled out on field and in the classroom, gained interest from some of the most prestigious institutions across the country. Can you pinpoint the moment where you said to yourself, it's the Irish?
I kind of always had like an idea in the back of my head, like that's where I wanted to go, probably from right when Coach Stucky got in there. He texted me before he announced that he took the position, and he was like, man, I want you to be a part of, my branch. I feel like we can build a wide receiver at Notre Dame. It sounded good, but once I finally got up there, I was like, man, this is the place. So, I went ahead and pulled the plug and told Coach Freeman and Coach Reese, the whole staff was fired up just as much as I was. So I feel like I made the right decision for me in my life.
Well, they are surely fired up. And as someone who spent Saturdays growing up in South Bend, I know the faithful are ready to see you come and make your mark on that program. It's all about what you do with the opportunity from here on out. And you now have the opportunity to speak to your future fan base. Let the Irish faithful know what sort of players head to town.
I mean, I'm a real dynamic athlete. I'm not just a football player. I do it all. I run track as well. So I just want y'all to know y'all are getting a true athlete, as well as not to brag, but I feel like I'm a high character individual, and that's all a testament to my family, my friends, along with all the people here supporting me. So obviously, that's a testament to them. But just know that we're gonna win some championships when I'm up there, along with the great class that we're gonna build. So with all that being said, go Irish.
Braylon, congratulations from all of us here at CBS Sports to you and the entire family, that support system that's gotten you to this moment. Wake up those echoes, my friend.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right.
Yo, when he pulled up the LSU hat off his lap, I'm not gonna lie, for a split second, my heart sank a little bit. I was like, oh no. I'm usually prepared for that, but I was not prepared for that. Like, he put it, because at first, like, oh, that's a cool gold Notre Dame shirt. And then I saw LSU, I was like, oh. I was like, no, he didn't.
He trolled LSU, okay. Man.
He trolled me for a hot second there.
I know, man, but what a man! Yeah. If you want to get into Notre Dame's heart, troll LSU.
He just became everybody's favorite player by taking that, and I don't think it's a coincidence. That's where Dante is. This going to be this weekend as well. So big pickup, everybody. Big pickup, and obviously a little backstory. He said he actually committed to Notre Dame during his visit in March. Is when he said it was going to be. He didn't want to go public because he still had some visits set, and he obviously wanted to do this. So this has been one we've been kind of. My dad just texted me. He punked LSU. My dad's all fired up about it right now too. So when my pops is on there watching the show, it's fired up. But this has been one that's been big for Notre Dame, getting him to commit in April and not take out the visits and things like that. And he kind of said what we talked about in the article, Ryan, is Stanford was a major player for him until Notre Dame got involved. And he said it clearly, like, okay, the reason why did he like Stanford? They've been garbage for like 3 years. It's because the academic piece. This is a kid that understands, if I go to the NFL, if I'm an All-American in college and I go play and I'm a first round pick and I play in the NFL for 10 years, I'm done playing ball at 30, 31. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? How are you going to maximize the money you make? He's one of those kids that understands the value that Notre Dame brings beyond just the football field. So that's why he likes Stanford. And then, of course, once Notre Dame got in the board, and he talked about what we said earlier, Chancey Stucky had a big role in this recruitment. He's probably not in the class, might not be in the class if Chancey Stucky isn't the hire, which that was one of the things we didn't know. What kind of recruiter would Chancey Stucky be? Well, so far, and this is a pretty big, first notch on your belt for Chancey Stucky as a recruiter.
Yeah, no, it's huge. I mean, like you just said, if Chancey Stucky was not the hire, you probably don't have a shot at that kid, right? Like you have,
right.
Or you have a shot, but you probably don't have the inside track to that kid. And I mean, Chancey Stucky knocked that one out of the park, so it's
right
in a great position right now. I mean,
right.
you got to feel good about it, man. I can't get over the LSU troll right now. I just can't. It's one of the greatest moments in the world. So
right. So here's the other part about it too. I mean, there's just you kind of see some things in there from Braylon. You know, he's a very confident kid, but also a kid. It can be sometimes a challenge to combine the confidence you need to be a great football player with humility. And Riza with the super chat, and he said it, quote of the week, not to brag, but I'm a high character individual. And like that's Braylon though, right? Like he is a very humble kid we played the video, but he's also a kid that's very confident in himself and works hard to be the player he is and puts value in a lot of the other things that are away from football. So really impactful kid, Ryan. And we had a question, is he a 5-star kid? We'll get to that here in a second. William Chesney with another super chat. Thank you, William. Brian, did you have the inside track on him pulling that LSU hat? Little jab at BK. 100% agreed on everything you ever said about BK. I appreciate that, William. I would never tell a kid to do that. That's just not my style. Not that I have a problem with it. The only thing I have a problem with is when kids take hats and then throw them down, like throw them on the ground. Like, I think that's a little disrespectful. He didn't do that. I thought it was fun, but I would never tell a kid to do that. Not that doesn't mean I don't enjoy, like, that's the program. You're going to pull a hat on, like, just playing. Like, it couldn't have been any better than that. I mean, it was,
no,
it was pretty good.
He became my favorite 2023 recruit in that moment. Right in that moment, it happened. I really liked it before that, but now I love the kid. Yep.
Yeah, I enjoyed that very, very much. So the question was, is he a 5-star kid? So not yet. I'm trying to find where that was. Ryan, it was down here a little bit. Let me just pull that up. Here we go. DC Irish 1213. Is he a 5-star kid? So where Ryan and I have him right now, we both view him as a top 100 recruit. I have him sort of in the 50 to 75-ish range, just because right now, the way that we do it, an Irish breakdown, the way that I do it, and Ryan's learning it, there's a grade of who you are now, and then a grade of what we think you can be when it all gets put together. And the put together thing can be technical. Guy's got to grow into his body. There's all types of things that go into it. I think he's a 50 to 75, probably closer to, for me, to 60 to 70-ish range if I'm going to really zone in right now, because the tools are outstanding, but he is raw. I mean, he's a kid that's going to still need more work compared to some other receivers. Like, there's a lot of questions that I want to get to, Ryan, about comparing him to Braylon James, to Carnell Tate. And they're different players, similar body types, right? Like Carnell's, 6'2", 185, Braylon's 6'3", 185, both long. Carnell's more of Carnell's just a more advanced player. I mean, that's the thing and Braylon is still learning. And one of the things that I said, and this is, as I said, I hate people that will praise a kid until he's no longer considering their school, then be like, he wasn't that good anyway. I said a couple weeks ago when we thought Notre Dame had a really good chance with Carnell Tate that the two highest upside guys on the board for me were Braylon James and Tyler Williams, not Carnell Tate. Carnell has the best combination of floor and ceiling, but that I thought that Braylon has a higher ceiling, right? And Tyler Williams as well. And obviously Carnell's now in the class. So this is a 5-star upside kid. He's not as advanced at the same age as Tobias Merriweather was, for example. Tobias was a really good route runner as a sophomore, but there's a lot of similarities between him and Tobias, I believe, in that he could play boundary, he can play field. In an ideal scenario with those two, I'd probably have Tobias as my field guy and Braylon as my boundary guy, right?
Agreed.
That's probably how I would view those two players.
Yeah. Well, and because I think what Braylon does best is he's that. If you're gonna match him one-on-one, where you're gonna get a lot of that into the boundary, into that Z position for Notre Dame, or the W position, excuse me, you are gonna get a lot of ability for Braylon James, I think, to kind of take the top off the defense, and that vertical speed is what really is going to threaten you. But also back shoulder game, physical above the rim, like he can kind of do all those things. I think he can really handle press man coverages, man coverage in general into that boundary. So I would agree. And I think that Tobias is just a little more, like you said before, he's a little more technically refined as a route runner. So I like him kind of navigating space a little more right now than Braylon. I think Braylon can get there, though, because he has the tools to do it.
Right.
But right now athletically speaking, Braylon James is a special player with the football in the air and the ability to win vertically down the field.
Right. And you compare him to like a Jaden Greathouse, who's also from Texas. Night and day different players. I mean, Jaden Greathouse is a significantly better player today, but you don't recruit off what you think a guy is in high school. You recruit off what you think he'll be in college, and that's one of the things I like about Braylon James is, it's that high ceiling. If you're going to take a chance on a kid, take a chance on a 6'3" kid that can run. But you see other things too, Ryan, and that's the thing I like about it is you see the ability to, you see the potential to run routes. He'll get it. We're gonna have Brian Smith on here in a little bit, and Brian has seen Braylon at some spring and winter workouts where you're starting to see that route running aspects kind of start to show itself a little bit more. And so there's a ton of potential there. But I think the Cardinal Tate thing is what I don't want us to do is all of a sudden, get into, well, now that Cardinal's not coming to Notre Dame, he's not a good player. He wasn't that good. He's overrated. He's not going to.
Right.
The Cardinal's a great player. Braylon James can be a great player, and that's why we've been so excited about him for so long, is because he has the tools that you really look for.
Right.
And that's at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? It's about upside. What's your potential? And I think that was Corey D's question. In 3 years, who was the better Tate receiver? Cardinal Tate and Braylon James. I think with
the same coaching, I would say Braylon James, right? Because assuming that the coaching is up to par and is up to standard. Yeah.
I'd say I would even say in 3 years, so that counts senior year of high school, freshman year of college, and then sophomore year of college. I say then it still may be Cardinal by then. If you start talking about 4 years, by the time they're juniors, that's when the conversation gets rolling. John, you ready to roll? You ready to rock and roll? Not yet. Okay, so we'll keep going. John's getting ready done. He gave me the Dikembe Mutombo. He's not ready yet.
No.
But that's the thing is that as you build a class, you need to balance some of that. It's like, so they're going to need at least somebody that can come in at receiver and play right away. I'm very curious to see what kind of growth that Braylon makes between now and next year, because like I said, the size, the speed, the ball skills are there. It's just about take over, Ryan. Sorry.
It's about technical refinement for a guy like Braylon James. I think what's really interesting about this hire is we've heard a lot of great things this spring so far about Chancey Stucky and just kind of his attention to detail as far as crafting a receiver. And I think you saw it in only his 1 year at Baylor. I mean, the year before he got there, RJ Sneed was an okay player. Tyquan Thornton had basically no production the year before. And then he comes the next year and they just look like completely different. They look like completely different football players. So you're hoping that Coach Stucky has those chops to kind of develop. So I think Braylon James is a player where the long-term is going to outweigh the short-term. Obviously, I don't think he's a guy that's going to, I think he can potential to play as a true freshman, just how athletic he is. But you're much more banking on what he is as a junior compared to when he was a freshman. So it's a big question. It's not a huge question mark because we're hearing good things, but how good of a coach Chancey Stucky is, if he's as good as we think he can be, based upon what things we're hearing, then the upside is immense with Braylon James. There's no question about it.
Yeah, and we had another super chat from K Grant, the LSU hat. Notre Dame, like you said, you nailed it, right? Notre Dame fans are super fired up. Zach Martin with a great response on his super chat. Brian was midway through taking his Gap Closer's shirt off before the camera switched back when that LSU hat came out. You're not lying. You're not lying, Zach. You're not lying. I want to bring in John Garcia, the director of recruiting at SI All-American, John. And, you and I talked earlier today, and we've talked a lot about Braylon as a player and those kind of things. You made a comment to me that I want you to share with Notre Dame fans in general, and that is it is so important for Notre Dame to start getting back into getting athletes out of Texas.
Yeah, I don't think I should have to elaborate a ton, but look, when you're Notre Dame, you have to recruit nationally. I mean, every program does, right? I mean, you look at any national champion in the last decade, they recruit nationally. But Notre Dame in particular really has a limited pool locally. So you have to recruit nationally on a much more high-pressure status than Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson and all the most recent, Georgia certainly, the most recent national champions. So I think Texas speaks for itself in terms of the talent pool. But what we also talked about, Brian, is that it's the right time to dig into Texas because there is no dominant program in terms of they will keep all of the elite kids home. You know, UT's run was at this point 15 years ago. I mean, some of your viewers might not even remember that run. And since then, it's really been wide open. And I think once Texas A&M jumped into the SEC, everybody realized, hey, Texas is out there for the taking. So you've seen the entire SEC plug into Texas, but it still hasn't shown up for anybody else. It's not shored up, I should say, for anybody else. So your Notre Dames, your Ohio States will still go down in there. And to compete at the highest level, you want ND in that conversation. And with Braylon James, they've been in it for 2 years now.
Right.
And as everyone has mentioned, Stucky just kind of put an accelerator on it for the Irish. Because when I first started tracking Braylon and talking to people around him, I was just hearing Ohio State, Ohio State, Ohio State. So for it to have shifted so quickly and so firmly now to where nobody's surprised he commits to Notre Dame tonight, I think says a lot about the program, about Freeman, and certainly about Stucky.
And I think you talk about Ohio State, and you look at what Ohio State's been able to do just at receiver in the state of Texas. I mean, wasn't two of their three? Isn't Jackson Smith and Jigba also from Texas?
Yep, yeah. Garrett Wilson.
I mean, just give me one of them, right? I mean, if you're Notre Dame, can I just have one? You know, Marvin Harrison, I think, also came from Texas.
NFL teams are saying that too right now, Brian. Just give me seriously. One of them.
I mean, that's the thing. And then they just got another kid out of Texas this year. I'm not quite as high on him as I was Garrett Wilson and Jackson coming to high school. He's still a good football player. They've dipped into the Southwest. They got the Keon, was it Graves, the kid out of Arizona this year. So there's a lot of talent in the Southwest that Notre Dame has just not even been competing for. And I think that's the biggest difference with this staff, John, is this is a staff that, you know, Marcus Freeman also believes in shopping down a different aisle. It's just not the aisle Brian Kelly shopped down. His aisle is like, oh, that's where Dabo and Saban and Ryan Day are going. I'm going down that aisle, right? That's the aisle that's going to get me a championship. And they're going down it. And you got to get kids like this in order to do that, especially because, John, you've been doing this a long time. And this is one of the things that bothers me. There's this perception that all these big time players are just about football, and they just care about football and now NIL. None of them want to go. You're telling me that there weren't offers for Braylon James to go somewhere else for money, but he's a kid that said, A, I want to get away from home, and B, it's more. There's a lot more to it than that immediate payday. There's a lot more kids out there like that than people think, and it's important that Notre Dame get those kids, especially when they're from places like Texas.
Yeah, and how about the little mini troll job, like the classy troll job that he went with? You know, it was a very subtle, quick, if you blink, you missed it kind of troll. Again, 5.3 GPA showing up in a lot of different ways.
It was mini if you're you and a national person.
That's
it felt like 5 minutes for Notre Dame fans. Like, no, you know, I mean, and then like, you know.
I imagine Brian Kelly with a single tear coming down his face personally. That was just
first he starts grinding on somebody in the office, then he gets all sad. But I love it. But you're right though. Then he has but then he says nice things, and he's a good kid. He just went from I like this pickup to my new favorite recruit in the class with a lot of Notre Dame fans when he chucked that LSU hat to the side. That was impressive.
But the first thing he said was, we talked about academics. That was the first thing he really talked about in weighing his options, and he mentioned that was available at Stanford certainly. But he mentioned that combination at Notre Dame, which really at the very highest level, Notre Dame can sell that better than anyone. I mean, I know this is a Notre Dame podcast, but who can sell the highest combination of academics and athletics on a national scale? I think this was almost a poster child type of victory on the recruiting trail for a kid who was wanted athletically everywhere, but was focused on academics along the way.
And that's why it's so important that Notre Dame has started to win, number one, But this is exactly why it was important they started beating Stanford. And we'll talk a little bit with Brian Smith about this later too, because this is the kind of kid that 7-8 years ago that Stanford beat Notre Dame for, because they were beating Notre Dame on the field consistently, thoroughly. And that's why, Brian Kelly finished his career at Notre Dame with a losing record against Stanford. So the combination of Notre Dame taking that series back and Stanford fading, now all those kids that were going to Stanford when they were a top 10 team every year are now starting to come to Notre Dame, or at least they should. And this is a perfect example of that kind of kid. I'm telling John, 5 years ago, Notre Dame doesn't get this kid, in my opinion. Before they started winning and really started becoming the program that they've became. And they still might not have got him if the previous staff was in charge. But with Marcus Freeman and his staff now doing it the right way, there's more kids out there like Braylon, in my opinion, than a lot of fans realize.
Yeah, I was going to say a year ago, it was Ohio State and Stanford. I mean,
Right.
It's not – you don't have to go 5. I mean, a year ago, it was those two schools. So, yeah, it can change in short order, and that's another good lesson to follow in recruiting. These kids – I say it seemingly every day – these kids don't have the wide scoping knowledge base that we do with programs relative to perception. So, me and you might view a Stanford or even going back further at Tennessee, a Notre Dame or Nebraska, as a program with some weight to it. These kids don't remember Vince Young.
Right.
They don't know about Miami's run in the early 2000s. They don't know about any of those things. So It's always good to reinforce that and how quickly things can change on the trail when you're dealing with, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids.
Yeah, because juniors in high school now were in early middle school the last time Stanford in think about that, 2015 to a kid like Braylon James was, what, 6th grade? Right? 7th grade, maybe?
Right.
Yeah.
Might not even be locked in on football at that point.
Right. And so it really does matter, in my opinion, to really have, I mean, the success matters. You got to win to get there. I mean, that's the important thing. But this is a big pickup for Notre Dame, and I think it sends a lot of messages, and hopefully for Notre Dame, this is the thing that kind of gets their offensive class rolling. Because I mean, defensive class is, even without Justin Rhett, is still the best defensive class in the country as of now.
Agreed.
Now the offense has kind of been, Cooper Flannan's really good. Cedric Shervin's a solid player, but man, is there a game changer there now? Now you have a kid that's got the tools to be that kind of guy. And he's unique, John, too, because I know SL American likes to focus a lot on the floor. And this is one of those kids that's is more of a ceiling kid. What's your assessment? I mean, we've talked a lot about the commitment, but just getting in the film room, just give me some thoughts here. Because for people who know, John was a defensive back in high school, so that's his position. And I always love kind of getting his view of receivers, because he's going to look at it, maybe from a different angle. So just what do you see when you pop on the film of Braylon James? And because you've watched him evolve over the last couple of years as a player as well.
Right. And that's what's exciting, because the first time you watch him to today, you see a growth. And it also reminds you that, hey, there's room for it to continue rolling up that trajectory, especially in the polish department. The foundation is there. He knows how to begin to set up a defensive back. He knows how to stem his route initially. But when you start building combinations, it's like a pass rusher. You add moves to the repertoire and you develop them within the same route or in the same pass rush. So he's at that middle stage where he's added the first one or two. Now he needs to counter it with some other moves. But in terms of the physical traits, they're off the charts, right? 6'2", 185 or so. And no disrespect to those putting on the broadcast, but nobody mentioned the ball skills. Mm-hmm. The ball skills are the first thing that you say, hold on now. This kid can track the football, and it's something we don't talk about enough with wide receivers and defensive backs. It's not just playing the apex. It's not just breaking on the ball if you're talking about a DB. Can you track the football without losing speed, without wasted motion, without breaking stride? Braylon can do those things already. So again, as he polishes up and adds to the arsenal, now all of a sudden he becomes a full route tree guy, which again, at 6'2", that's not something we talk about with a lot of guys, being a full route tree guy. So I'm super high on him. I think he's a floor and ceiling guy, really. Yeah. I think his floor can contend as a top 10, top 12 guy today. But I think when you talk about his ceiling, that's when he starts to creep into the for sure top 10 range. And in this class, as we'll talk about as time goes on, that's a big deal. This class is going to be known for quarterbacks, wide receivers, maybe offensive tackle. So to be in that top group at one of those positions is a really, really big deal.
And just so people understand, John's talking about top 10 to 12 at receiver.
Yes,
is what we're referring to, which top 10 to 12 gets you surefire top 100 player. I mean, that, in this class, it's a top 100 player, no doubt. There, we were kind of talking about that, like, is there going to be room for any other positions besides quarterback, running back, offensive tackle, and I would say corner is another class I really like in this.
Yeah, I mean, those are going to be 40 of the SI 99 this summer
at least.
It's going to be. Yeah. It's going to be a fun one. A lot of skill pizzazz, and that's good because last year was a heavy defensive line edge class. A lot of big guys. Wasn't as sexy to talk about, but now we're talking about
great
skill guys.
Class, yeah,
very good linebacker class.
Yeah.
So now we're talking more skill, more space guys, which really moves the needle a little bit more. So I'm not mad at that one.
I want to bring Brian Smith into this conversation too. Brian, you ready to rock and roll? Okay, he's ready to go. Bryant is chilling today. So, Brian, we wanted to bring you on too because you are the person who has seen Braylon work out the most recently in person. You've been over to Texas this year, traveling for SI All-American. Brian Smith obviously runs the Central Florida site for SI Fan Nation and also does a lot of work with SI All-American. How have you seen his game grow, Brian, from the kid we've seen as a junior that's toolsy but raw to what you've kind of seen here now this spring as he's developing his game?
First thing would be anticipation. After he gets into his route, he doesn't always run the route perfectly, but the difference between this year and last, you just watch the film like you were talking about his sophomore year. I was watching part of the show when you brought that up. It's a lot different. He's not a kid that knew all the things that he needed yet, and he shouldn't. He's 15, 16 years old, and his routes are sharper. He makes cuts at better times. He sets up DBs better, and with his length, like I stood next to him. He's so long at the hip, it's almost weird. I mean, he's the kind of kid that looks like a basketball player. That's a good problem to have. And now with his length and his second level speed, he can run away from guys that are 5'9", 170, and he still hasn't been to a college weight training program yet. His upside is still very high. So the development is kind of in that midpoint, but he still has a whole nother level that he can go to. And you talked about him with a 5-star upside. I agree. You said it very well. I just don't know when it's going to get there. I mean, that's just part of watching football. It's fun.
And that's the thing we were talking about before you guys joined was obviously Notre Dame fans are going to compare him a lot to Cardinal Tate, who is the big name 5-star kid that a lot of people talk to. And one of the questions was in 3 years, who's a better player, Cardinal Tate, Braylon James? And I said, maybe 3 years, but it may be 4 before Braylon really takes that final leap. But a lot of that's going to be determined by, is he able to take the lessons he's learning now? He's back at Stony Point. Can he take those lessons? Because at some point in time, the production has to match the tools. And so far, because of a lot of different factors, offensive style, quarterback, and all that, the production hasn't been there like it has been for some other kids in this class. And that's the thing, like Garrett Wilson and a lot of those guys, they were producers in high school, and Braylon hasn't been there yet. So I think that's the thing for me. But I think Brian's point is, the light could go on as a freshman for Braylon. We don't know what kind of growth spurt he's going to have. But it could also till he's a junior, and that's for me, John. I'm actually kind of encouraged to hear that you're a little higher on his floor than I am, even, which is a good sign, I think, for what this kid could be.
Yeah, look, Brian went there. We know Coach Costa pretty well. Del Valle's, fighting an uphill battle in that Austin area. Austin Westlake, is right there. So, Braylon had to be sort of the focal point of that offense, and they're often trailing. So it was a little harder for him to get loose against some good coaching. I do think that his floor is rock solid, though. I think what I haven't talked about much with him in retrospect is the speed. I think that's where. When you first watch him, you say, okay, well, I think he can be your possession guy. I think he could be your 3rd and 6, go over the middle guy, and maybe develop into a combination route type. But then you watch him more recently, and you pair it with some of the other stuff athletically, and now you say, well, now he can be that full route tree guy that can at least challenge you at the 3rd level, running deep digs, corner routes, things like that all of a sudden, change how you defend him.
Right.
So I think that's where the growth for me in particular has really hit another level. And that's why I feel like his floor is a little bit higher, because he's not just this semi-polished receiver with great size and ball tracking ability. Now he's got some speed on the top end of it.
Like a Jaden Greathouse is kind of you're describing Jaden Greathouse.
Right in his backyard, right? High school rival of his, which that will be fun to track down the line. Obviously the Irish in it. So I think that's why I'm higher on his floor. But I do still think that his room to grow relative to a Carnell Tate is totally different. With Carnell, you're just like, hey man, put on some size. You don't know how explosive
That's it. It's
he's
the
going
physical
to get.
growth. Right.
Right. You don't know how explosive Carnell's going to be. Is he ever going to take the top off of a defense without doing it with technique? Probably not. But everything else is already there. So with Braylon, it's the opposite. We know now he can challenge the top of the defense, but can he figure out the other stuff in the meantime?
And that's more coachable, John. That's the thing.
That's coachable. Exactly.
That's more something I can, as a receivers coach, I can teach that. I can't. And I think the thing about his speed is interesting is the kid averaged like 12-something yards a catch last year, right? Because there's a lot of short stuff. You'd see in this, Ryan and I had this discussion when we first broke down his film, because it's like you don't notice the speed at first. There's about 7 or 8 clips on there where you're like, okay, that's different. Because, again, I think that's where the technique gets into it. Smitty and I have been talking about this for years. I mean, a kid could be fast, but if he doesn't know how to play football, he's not going to look fast, right? I mean, if he's not confident in what he's doing, he's not going to look fast. But then you see Braylon on a couple of those kick returns where he kind of catches that edge. And you're like, oh, okay, there it is, right? But you're like, okay, when's it going to show up in football? Well, then, as we reported earlier, I've got results from a camp he was at where he ran a 4.47, jumped 38 inches, and had a 130-inch broad jump. Right? Not 130. Yeah, 130-inch. Ryan, was that what I said earlier?
It was like 10-10, right?
Yeah, something like that. So that's like, okay, there's some explosiveness there that, according to Smitty, we're starting to see now show more and more on the football. I remember Brian called me one time, and what was it you said to me, Brian? He's like, there's nobody that's going to cover this kid deep or something like that. Like he was just killing people at whatever thing you were at. Like, because once his legs get going, it's like, I mean, he's just going to chew you up and just run by you.
That's
what you want to see.
When I was at Under Armour and they were doing one-on-ones, Dallas area is ridiculous with defensive backs. And I get it that it's an offensive advantage thing. I get that. But he made guys that were 3 to 4 inches shorter than him look bad. Not like beat them, but look bad. And that's the difference. Usually guys that are 6'3" cannot make people look bad in open space with stop and start moves, spin moves, etc. And that's what Braylon can do. He reminds me when I was growing up in Indiana, one of those guys that cross over and cuts through the lane and dunks on somebody, but he's just doing it on a football field now instead of a basketball court. And that's fine. So his hop, as Ryan likes to talk about, his ability to get off the floor is fantastic. He's long and he's fast. What's not to like?
So, John, looking at it from this standpoint, last year, obviously Notre Dame came up way short in numbers at receiver. Lost C.J. Williams, who was an SI 99 guy. I loved that. Even when he left Notre Dame, went to USC, I was like, that kid, we got to move him up the rankings because he's a volume guy, completely different type of player. Lost him more in Walker, which I don't care. But to me, to be able to put a Tobias Merriweather, who we had ranked 46th overall last year, with a Braylon James in back-to-back classes, that's what Notre Dame hasn't been doing in a long time. We've seen a kid here, a kid there, but to land a couple 6'3+ guys, the thing I like about it is they do a lot of similar things, but they're still different players. It's like what Braylon, like we know that Tobias can be a great route runner, can do things after the catch and do all those kind of things. You say, okay, how explosive is he really going to be? Braylon's the exact opposite, but also, even though there's a lot of similarities, we know he can stretch the field. I love that compliment of Tobias and Braylon in the same receiving core. And if Notre Dame's going to close the gap and have the kind of talent on offense a lot of these other teams have, it's going to take more and more Tobias Merriweathers and Braylon Jameses, and now you're starting to see them add some of those guys to the roster.
Big receivers with speed. I mean, that what more could you want? Like Brian Smith said, it's one thing to get a slot who can do some things, maybe a guy who's great laterally and can break you down in the short to intermediate game. But when you get bigger guys who can take the top off or challenge the third level of a defense, it changes your entire offense. And when you talk about running the football on early downs, that helps as well.
Right.
When you're 6'2", 6'3" with that basketball frame, that upside down triangle, that we talk about. I mean, hip to back or hip to shoulder, upside down triangle. Now you got long arms on top of that. So it just really maximizes what you do, both in the pass run game and even the extension of the run game in the short screen, jet sweep, bubble screen kind of game.
I just started thinking about Notre Dame running a play action game with a Harry Heastan coached offensive line, and a post dig or post drag combination with Tobias Merriweather and Braylon James in a couple of years. When you seriously start thinking about that, though, with the way Notre Dame recruits tight end and how well they've been doing it running back, that's what you need, though, right? Like, you need that individual player that says, hey, you want to go cover our tight ends, you want to do this, and you want to try to cover me one-on-one, that's fine. It's about
– and Colsey ain't slow either now.
Right, but that's the point, though. You're starting to you've now had, Colsey and Styles and then Tobias and now Braylon. The thing is now, however, guys, is it can't be just like those other classes where it's like a guy here, a guy there. They've got to really start loading up, but this is certainly a great way to start. But this is, John, you talked about this. This is such a deep receiver class that Notre Dame has to take advantage because there's a need there. They have to take advantage and get at least two of those high-level guys in this class.
Yeah, when you talk about even just in Florida where me and Bryant live, I mean, there's 20 to 25 like Power 5 receivers in the state of Florida, and that number's growing. Like Brian's talking about, like we went to the camp a couple weeks ago. This kid Tyree Patterson looks like Braylon James physically. No Power 5 offers. We write about him. Florida offers the next day. Now he's committed to the Gators. Like it's a loaded class at the wide receiver position. So you have to contend with the very best. And obviously, Carnell Tate is maybe the cream of the crop today. But there's a lot of other guys behind him or in that group, in that conversation that Notre Dame's going to have to factor in for before all is said and done. But again, winning a national battle provides some of that name recognition and kind of that, like Notre Dame. Okay, he went to Notre Dame. Kids see that. And that's another thing we probably don't talk about enough. Right. Kids are keeping an eye on all this stuff. You think we're on social media a lot as adults? These kids live on it, and they'll have the scoop before we do. They've known Braylon's going to Notre Dame, so that stuff matters too because these kids travel and these kids talk a ton.
John was just talking about all the talent in Florida, and Texas are comparable. John, just so you know, you're going to be helping me with an article that I literally have on my screen right here. There are about 40 Power 5 receivers in the state of Florida this year. And I'm not exaggerating.
It's an insane receiver.
I'm not
class.
exaggerating.
It's an insane receiver class.
And I'm talking about kids not just like barely sneak in. At the bottom half, there are kids that have offers from Miami and Florida State and stuff of that group. And Texas is exactly the same. So your point about Notre Dame has to recruit Texas? Absolutely. You got to do it.
I think that's something that helps Notre Dame too, because some of these kids are going to start getting scooped up by those schools, those Southern schools, which means, maybe those schools, like in some years, and here's a guy we broke down the other day, Micah Tease, Ryan and I broke down when we were doing the defensive backboard. Well, he wants a shot on offense. Well, you're talking about a kid from Booker T. Washington High School in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that's, Oklahoma's not really in a great position for. I think in other years, you'd have more SEC schools going up to try to get him. But because it's so deep in their backyard, maybe he's not getting the national attention he normally would, which, again, that plays well for Notre Dame if they're going to give him a shot at receiver. And there's a lot of guys, Ronan Hannafin's a guy like that. Like, how hard do you want to push for Ronan Hannafin if you think he's going to go to Notre Dame if there's other kids in your backyard? And I think all of those things kind of, to me, are to Notre Dame's advantage. And some of these kids that want to wait, Notre Dame, there's a lot of schools that are going to be like, like Cardinal Tate right now is trying to play that game. They're eventually like, hey, look, buddy, we love you, but I don't know if you noticed, but there's like 6 of you this year, right? Like, it's fine. We'll go get this other kid. And some of those, not Cardinal Tate per se, but, some of those kids are like, hey, look, maybe they're not in on Notre Dame right now, but you got to stay in the game because those schools may fill up and that kid may still be on the board, and like Brian, I know there's a kid that you and I are both super high on in Florida that I hope can start showing more interest in Notre Dame because I know Notre Dame loves him. And if they're able to get him, I mean, that's where you start talking about, gap closers, about gap erase, and that's Tyler Williams. And I said 2 weeks ago when we thought that we still thought 2 weeks ago that Notre Dame had a real good shot with Cardinal Tate. We went on the message board and we were talking to receivers, and I said the 2 guys with the highest ceiling on the board for Notre Dame in this class, and 2 of the guys with the highest ceilings in the entire class are Braylon James and Tyler Williams. Even more than, to me, much higher ceilings than Cardinal Tate. I mean, that's it. But again, Tyler Williams, in my opinion, doesn't have Braylon James' personality, the engaging, but he is also a kid, Brian, that you've told me isn't just a football player. He's a kid who comes from a family where the academic piece is going to matter a lot more than what you typically find at a public school in the state of Florida.
Well, he goes to Lakeland High School, and for those of you who don't know, Polk County in Florida per capita, it's a bunch of small towns all connected. They're all very competitive. It's the 863, the whole 9 yards. It's very inclusive. Talent-wise, it's as good as any area in the country, and I know John can back that up. We live very close to it. It's the next county over from where I live, and I'll go see him next Monday. I can go see any kid I want in the state of Florida next Monday, and I'm going to see Tyler. What does that tell you?
Mm-hmm.
He's special, man.
Coincidence? No.
And he was a quarterback 12 months ago.
Right.
I mean, it's fascinating. We went to one of Lakeland's last games of the regular season because he had just started to pick up some steam. Like, hey, this basketball player was a quarterback, and then he transferred to Lakeland. Now he's playing receiver. And we go watch him, late in the season. We're like, oh, this isn't just one of those basketball players. Like, this is a guy that can legitimately, take over a game in football, which is so hard to do in any state, much less Florida. So you kind of got intrigued on that first impression. Then every time since, he's been better. So he's getting better in very short order with all those natural gifts. So, yeah, it's a loaded year. I mean, if it took us this long to talk about Tyler Williams, I mean, that shows you how loaded the year is. But it's going to be good for the big boys. I've said that earlier today. Your Notre Dames, your Ohio States, your Alabamas, they're going to have great receiver classes because the pool at the top is so deep with the wide receiver boards. Even USC, I would think, is going to have a great receiver class this year because there's that many great wide receivers to pull from. So it's going to be interesting to see.
There's not as many schools going out west to get the best of the West Coast because they don't need to.
Right.
They're sitting there in their backyard. And that factors into it. And, it's kind of interesting you talk about Tyler Williams, but I feel like 20 years ago, guys like Tyler Williams and Braylon James are two guards, going to Rice or something like that to play basketball. Right. And those are the kind of guys I love. And I mean, that's what LSU's receiving core in 2019 was built around, right? It was those tall. I mean, Jamar Chase was a small guy at 6'1", 210. He was the small guy. I mean, Justin Jefferson was at 6'4". Terrace Marshall was 6'3", 6'4". They had another kid on that receiving core who was like 6'2", and I cannot remember his name for the life of me. It's so many dang kids. I mean, that's it though, right? It's because what you have to have in today's offense, guys, and back to Braylon James, and this is why, John, you mentioned this is why it's so important. You have to have guys that can just beat people. I mean, you at some point in time, you can scheme your way, and Notre Dame's been this way. You can scheme and out-talent your way to 10 wins a year against mediocre competition. But you want to beat Bama, you want to beat Clemson with some – you want to beat Ohio State. You have to start having some kids that are like, okay, yeah, your dude is good, but we have guys now at receiver that can just go beat you, right? And that's what Clemson had in 2018. I mean, who do you take out? Justin Ross, T. Higgins. Okay, fine. You got Amari Rogers. You've got Hunter, Renfrow. I mean, that's what you need. Guys that like somebody. You got to single cover somebody, right? And when you do that, whoever's being single covered is going to beat you. And that's, to me, what a guy like Braylon James has the ability to do that they just haven't had enough of on their – they've had a Chase Claypool, but there wasn't a second Chase Claypool on the roster, right? They've had a Will Fuller, but there wasn't a second Will Fuller on the roster. That's the difference between Notre Dame and a lot of these other programs is they'll have a great receiver. Michael Floyd was a monster, but who was like opposite him? It was like a young T.J. Jones. It was Daniel Smith. It was Robbie Toma, where these other schools are like, oh, it's Jordan Jefferson, but who's with him? Jamar Chase, Terrace Marshall. I mean, and that's where Notre Dame's got to get to, and that's why getting Tobias and Braylon in back-to-back years, right after getting Lorenzo Styles and Deion Colsey, is so important for Notre Dame.
100%.
Guys, thank you all both so much for joining. Any other comments that you guys would like to make about Braylon James or the Notre Dame class or anything else like that? Feel free. Brian, we'll go ahead and kick it off with you. John, I'm sorry, I got to go Brian first because he is the Notre Dame fan. So we got to give him
I get it. I do got my green on, though. You see the green?
Yeah, you did. You did. I'm digging it.
Color coordination.
Notre Dame green, but it's all good. It's all good.
We're getting there.
I just want to see Notre Dame, and Driscoll and I have talked to this a couple of years. They need a slot receiver that other teams fear, because then guys like whether it's Tate or Braylon James, whoever you put around them, they're always single covered. and they're 5 yards automatic and they make the first guy miss, they can score. Notre Dame doesn't get enough of those guys. I want to see them get somebody with this big group that's a move around guy.
There's 2 guys on the board that fit that bill for me, Ryan.
Mhm.
Ryan and John. And that is obviously Rodney Gallagher is
Absolutely.
one. And the other's Micah Tease.
Big
If Micah Tease is set on being a receiver, I think he brings some of that as well. I think those
Are they still going after Tees, or is that
Oh, yeah.
to be determined? Okay,
no, they're very
I didn't know.
the only question with Micah Tease is they want him bad. They've wanted him for a while. He's been on campus 3 times. It's offense or defense. They like him probably a little bit more on defense. He wants to play offense, and Notre Dame staff is like, fine, you want to play offense? We'll play offense, right? But they also like him a lot on defense. But to me, I think the dream scenario is you get Gallagher, he's on offense, and then Micah Tease can be a defensive guy if he can't stick on offense. Although I think Micah, even though he's not the biggest guy, has some outside receiver to him, kind of like a Braden Lindsey, type of Lorenzo Styles type of guy. But I think you have to get one of those 2 guys, to your point, Bryant, to get that complementary unit to where you're not just a bunch of big trees. Because that's what Clemson had, right? You had the 2 trees on the outside, but you had Amari Rogers and you had Hunter Renfro. And I've argued this before, and Ryan and I have talked about this on the show. The fact that Clemson didn't have that kind of guy last year with all those giants was a big part of the reason their spread offense doesn't work. You need guys who can do damage after the catch, and they recruited a bunch of pro-style, big, tall receivers like Joseph Ngata and and all these other kids,
Frank
Bo
Ladson.
Collins and all that, right? Frank Ladson. And they didn't have that guy, to your point, Ryan, that you can throw a bubble screen to and he's going to make people miss, or he's going to make a guy miss on a slant route and outrun him. Whereas LSU went the opposite direction, where that's all they had at receiver in the last couple of years. And same with Ohio State. I mean,
Alabama too.
Bama's that way.
Yeah.
Ohio State's been that way, where basically they just got 3 slot guys and they just, one of you go, so if you're going to err on the side of it, I like the error of citing on the bigger guys with a slot guy. That's just my personal preference, especially Notre Dame with who's more of a pro style type of offense is going to run the ball. But even in that type of offense, you got to have at least one guy, hopefully a couple, that can be that turn a 4-yard hitch into a big play.
Exactly.
That's going to be the big
That's all I'm asking. That's all.
So are we assuming the Jaylen Brown ship has sailed here, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think once Miami's new staff came in and they made a run at him, had a couple different coaches made a run at him, and there just wasn't enough. I mean, just not a willingness to come up and visit and a lot of that stuff. So I think probably Jalen's dad liked Notre Dame a little bit more than Jalen did.
I agree.
Is kind of what it comes down to. And no, I'll say this staff has been much better about recognizing that and knowing that at the end of the day, we're not getting a kid that doesn't like us, but his parents do.
Right.
And even if we can convince him to commit, he's going to flip, because eventually the parents are going to let the kid go where he wants to go. And so I think they kind of bowed out. Plus, they kind of looked at it as like Jaylen Brown and Rodney Gallagher is very similar, like fit for their offense. And I think they like the fact that Jaylen is more of a Kevin Stefferson, like stretch the field route runner, where Rodney's more of a take a screen and
football player.
Right. And I think they kind of felt that fit a little bit better than maybe Jaylen, who's a different body type than Braylon and Carnell and Ronan Hannafin and those guys. But his game is there's more care in his game to those guys than what a Rodney Gallagher or Micah Tease has. I think it's kind of part of it as well.
How many receivers do you think they would take?
They need at least 4.
That's
I think
what
they
I
would
think
take
too.
5 if one of those guys was like a Micah Tease type of player that could also be a defensive. Like if they were to get a 5-man, just hypothetically, let's say they get, and I'm just gonna, like, since I'm in a good mood, let's say they get Braylon James, Tyler Williams, Rodney Gallagher, Ronan Hannafin, and Micah Tease. 2 of those guys flat out can play defense if you need to. Now, Ronan Hannafin, that's going to be one of those ones where you've got 2 staff like just battling for who they want. Like Notre Dame loves Ronan Hannafin. It's like, where's he going to play? The receiving coaches and the offensive coaches say, hey, he needs to be an offensive guy. The defensive coach is like, no, he needs to be over here on defense. But the point is that he's a guy that can do both. So you can have a bigger class when a couple of those guys are legit 4-star, or however you want to rank it, defensive type of players. And that's why I think that's the only way they can get to 5, Brian. Because if you just have 5 guys can only play one position, receiver,
it's got to be balanced.
You're going to lose somebody. Once the 5th guy realizes I'm the 5th guy, right? He's going to say, "Oh, transfer portal, here I come." Where another guy may say, "Hey, look, I think I could play here in time, but I know I can go move over to cornerback and help them out right now." and that's the Xavier Watts type of guys. And Notre Dame's made a killing on guys like that. I mean, Kavari Russell.
They have for
Jay
35
Crow's,
years.
we were talking to the show the other day. Like I was looking at some old Notre Dame's recruiting class. Like Jeff Burris was listed as a running back. Todd Light was listed as a receiver.
Baby.
You know
Burris
what I mean?
was the best running back in high school.
Yeah, and there was one year Notre Dame signed like 7 running backs.
Yeah, but they knew
two of them stayed a running back. They knew that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Notre Dame had 4 number 1 classes in a row, and they signed like 1 corner in 4 years. No kidding.
Right. But yet they had 4.
They signed 4 running backs.
First or second round. Tom Carter, I think, was listed as a running back coming out of high school.
He played quarterback.
Yeah.
He played quarterback.
Yeah. So
they didn't sign any corners, and they just kept moving guys.
Yeah.
And they produced first and second round picks out of it.
Yeah, they're recruiting football players. I wrote an article about this the other day, guys. It's like there's 4 kids that you look like Micah Bell, the kid from Houston.
Oh,
like,
he's tremendous.
But right now he's a better offensive player than he's a defensive player.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, but his upside, his body type is better on defense.
Mm-hmm.
He can fly.
Yes. He can move. And I mean, but that's the thing is if you're able to get a kid like that on defense and Jeremiah Love and Micah Tease, and then you got a 6'3" kid like Braylon James who can run a 4.47. Just recently his dad sent me a video of him running a 13.9 in the 110-meter hurdles. You know what I mean? But that's where Notre Dame needs like more of those guys, you know, not just one guy that can run, but 4 of them. And that's what made the 2015. We've talked about this, Brian, with better coaching and a little bit more luck at a quarterback not getting hurt. That's the team that Notre Dame had the best chance of compete for a championship because they didn't just have one guy that could run. I mean, Will Fuller was a 4.3. Chris Brown was a 4.4. Amir Carlisle was a 4.4. CJ Prosise was a 4.4. Josh Adams was a 4.4. I mean, you just had guys that could run. Kavari Russell was a 4.4. Cole Luke was a 4.5. Matthias Farley ran a 4.45 at the pro shuttle. He even started safety. He started a full year for the Indianapolis Colts, but you know he couldn't start for a full season at Notre Dame. So, it's a lot. It's a lot. So, guys, I appreciate both. If you guys want to hang around, we're gonna do a Q&A. I know Ryan, you gotta get out of here. Ryan, anything you'd like to add before you get, because Ryan's got a long day ahead of him. He's heading to South Bend tomorrow. So from Jersey. Yeah. Spring game, Brian. It's coming up for the spring game.
Yeah. Nice 10-hour drive, man. It's going to be fun. And with a 14-month-old, so it's going to be even more fun. But hey, man, this was a long time coming, obviously, Brian, right? Like we haven't seen a commitment for Notre Dame since Preston Zinter a couple months ago. So
not in 2023,
not in 2023. Yeah, exactly. So needed it to get off to a good start, obviously, on the offensive side of the football. Right before this, Cedric Irvin Jr. and Cooper Flanagan were the only commits in the class. So getting a guy like a Braylon James, we keep talking about when is the offensive class really going to get kick-started? This could be the start of something.
Yeah, and I think that I think this is going to start a little snowball effect. I think you're going to see in the next week or so, probably a couple more guys on offense jump on board. So this is good. Somebody's got to be that first, right? And then maybe after a couple more, it's like, hey, Dante, look what.
Yeah, wait till the quarterbacks jump in, right?
Right. So we'll see, but.
I just confirmed that I'll see a certain running back from Columbus next Friday, so we'll see how he goes too.
Okay, there you go. All right, so Ryan, thanks for joining us. You guys, if you guys want to hang around and answer some questions, you're more than welcome to. But
I gotta run, man. I got the Heat playoffs.
Yes,
I know the Hawks suck, but come on now, we're chasing another chip now. So I'm gonna run to that one.
Have fun with that.
Hey, John, thanks for being with us today, man. I appreciate you as always, buddy.
Take care, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Brian. So Brian's got his Florida Gators shirt on today. Not really sure what that's all about.
Whenever I go to a game somewhere, I just pick up a shirt.
Yep, I know. I remember I used to have like a North Carolina shirt, Duke shirt. It's like, it's $5.
I've got all kinds of stuff from down here.
It was back in the day. Ronnie T'Challa has not been with us for a while. Hey, good to see you, Ronald. Hey, all, been a while. Wanted to be on for a live commitment. Maybe this will get the ball rolling on the offensive side of the ball. Brian, I brought up Ronnie. I wanted to save Ronnie's comment, first of all, because it's been a while. We love Ronnie. He was one of the OGs on this channel. But also, I do believe that momentum in recruiting is a real thing in football. Explain why, Brian, because I know the answer because you and I have talked about this before. But explain to people why it's so why momentum is a real thing when it comes to really landing elite players.
Garcia mentioned this earlier. Kids talk to each other. They go on the visits together, especially where John and I live in Central to South Florida. Every one of these kids, whether they like each other or not, they follow each other in some capacity. They text with each other. They send me messages. I get screenshots. When Johnny commits here, Timmy's interested. That stuff matters. They're all friends on 7-on-7. They go to Under Armour together, etc. When somebody balls out at Under Armour and then they go to a school, that school becomes the hot school. And I'll say this again. I know Notre Dame fans will hate this as much as any school. Kids do not pick this. They pick the coach and they pick comfort. Most of the kids don't care about this. Now, Braylon's kind of an exception. He's an old school guy, and that's great. But especially some of the kids like down here in Florida and stuff, you got to get them on football and comfort. And that's the academics you got to work them into and stuff. But it's everything, because most of the kids down here, they don't even know what state Notre Dame's in. And I'm not exaggerating. So you have to find little ways to get interest. And now with Braylon committing, even though he's a Texas kid, he's a national top 100, 150 kid by everybody. There's no service that doesn't have in top 150.
Only On 3, but they have absurd rankings.
On 3s.
They had Devin Brown as the number 1 player in the country last year. So, I mean.
No comment.
Dante Moore is the number 45 player in the country. I mean, that's enough said.
Yeah, I need to talk to Chad about that, because that's not acceptable. Chad's a good guy, but something's failing there.
Yeah, we're talking about Chad Simmons, obviously. We're not.
Chad's great in our industry. But anyway, you have to find ways to get kids interested in your school based on other kids now. Coaches don't have as much impact as they used to. I talked to Benny Serrato once, and he told me flat out, this is hilarious. He goes, I was glad when signing day came because I was tired of talking to these kids every day. Well, now they don't have to do that as much. Number one, it's text. Mm-hmm. And number two, everybody communicates, and they got all these analysts and different stuff, and then they have the recruits recruit for them. When Fisher was being recruited, remember how much of an influence he was for Notre Dame? And he was an offensive lineman, which is bizarre, but he was the Pied Piper. I'm not saying – I mean, I've met Dante.
He was a big-time player.
That's not just a talkative come to Notre Dame guy. He was a top 50 guy by anybody's account, and you and I both thought he was a 5-star kid.
Right.
And then when he committed to Notre Dame, I'm like, okay, well, they got an lineman. And then I'm like, holy cow. I've never seen a lineman for any school be a bigger Pied Piper. Not just saying that because I'm a Notre Dame fan.
And we've talked about this with Drake Bowen. I mean, it's fine that Drake Bowen's a local kid and he's in all the camps, but the reason Drake Bowen matters is not because he's a local kid, but it's because he's a top 50 recruit. I mean, you know, whether you like it or not, if you're a big-time football player, you want to play with other big-time football players.
That's right.
And that's the reality. I mean, it's different in basketball. It's important. And as you said, let's be honest too, Bryant, there's not a lot of kids who want to be the first. You know, there's a lot of kids who are like, yeah, I like Notre Dame, but but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, so-and-so's going there. Oh, Keon's going there. Okay, Peyton Bowen's going there. Oh, wow, now Braylon James is going there. Oh, you know, and you start going down that list. Then it's like, okay, yeah, that's the final thing I need. So I do think that what the rest of the class looks like sometimes with big time players can be the difference between whether or not a guy is willing to say yes or to say no, because he wants to make sure that if I'm going to go there, I want to make sure I'm going somewhere where I'm not going to be the only guy. I want to be surrounded by other guys, because in football especially,
it's different. Kids
want to win too. I mean, that's the reality of it. The kids want to win, and also, but even from a practical standpoint, if I'm a D end and I'm a stud, and I'm surrounded by a bunch of mediocre, legit 3-star caliber players, guess what? I'm not going to have great numbers because they're just going to spend all their time focusing on me. But if I'm Keon Keeley and I know that I'm going to have Brendan Vernon on the opposite side of me, or Jason Moore inside of me, or players like that, then I'm going to feel a lot better about staying in this class with Notre Dame.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And that's the reality. I mean, hey, if I'm a corner and I know that there's Keon Keeley and Tyson Ford and Aiden Gobira and Brendan Vernon and some other guys that are, Jalen Sneed and all these other guys, Josh Burnham, that are big-time recruits that are pass rushing, and say, you know what? Notre Dame may be that spot. That may be that move. So it really is an important thing. There's no question about it.
I think what you just said defines part of the other issue. There are a handful of kids you and I have talked about on the phone. They would like to go to Notre Dame. They just don't want the entire time commitment and all that with the academics. It's not that they're bad kids, but they just don't want it. It's a hell of a lot easier to accept, at least thinking about it, if you're going to play with dudes.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to rebuild a team that's coming off a 5-7 season, that's a hard pass.
Yeah.
You're at least getting a kid on campus.
Mm-hmm.
And they've 5 years in a row, they've won 10 or more games.
Yeah. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Yeah.
That's, okay, they've underachieved and they've had some.
But the kids, they don't know that like we know that who watch.
Oh, yeah. They just look at
They just see 11-2, 11-2, 12-1, 10-2, 10-3. That's what they see.
1,000%. So
yeah.
Yeah. Now, my comment earlier, like a lot of the kids here in Florida, They live in what I like to call the 5 mile bubble.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville. Everything you need is in a 5 mile radius where you're at, period. The beach, every restaurant known to man, all the entertainment parks, anything else. They don't give a crap about where other stuff is. I ask kids all the time, where's Wake or Duke or Notre? I get New York, Chicago, I get all Stanford. They don't even know what part of the country Stanford's in.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to go out of your way to get, and some of these kids are 4.0
Right.
kids. It's not a academic. It's just
right. And that's somewhat true in a lot of places, especially the bigger states, because there is so much near you. David Flores says Golden Tate played next to Michael Floyd. No, he didn't. Not in 2010 and 2011, which is the years that Michael Floyd was the beast that he was. That's what we're referring to. Not the 2008, 2009 version where Michael Floyd is hurt a bunch. But yes, they played next to each other. But 2010, no. They had to move Theo Riddick to receiver in 2010. TJ Jones was a true freshman. So that's not what we're referring to, David. Let's get to some more questions here. Corey D says, everyone, including myself, has been focusing so much on Cardinal Tate, and the reality is this: Braylon James is a stud who might be better than Tate. I don't disagree with that, but I think the reason that I would push back a little bit on, well, now that you got Braylon James, it doesn't matter what happens to Cardinal Tate, is it's not really the way that you look at it.
That's not how that
Braylon
ever
James,
works.
you need to go get more and more and more. I mean, and that's what you need. I mean, you don't often see it. Look, this thing, Brian, the Georgias are the anomaly. What Georgia did this year is an anomaly. And it was a lot of it had to do with the fact that Alabama did lose their two best receivers. That game's not competitive if John Mechie and Jamison Williams are both healthy. It's just not. It would have looked like the SEC title game. It's exactly what it would have looked like.
You're
Because
not
they couldn't
guarding
cover
both those
both those
guys
guys.
one-on-one. You're just
So unless you can guarantee that they're going to lose their two best athletes, the reality is it's rare that you're able to go out and be what they are. I mean, look at a lot of the teams that are winning championships in recent seasons. I mean, you look at
it to win it.
Right. You look at the 2020 Bama team, loaded at receiver, 2019 LSU, loaded at receiver with multiple big-time players.
Hell, Alabama's 19 receiver unit was even better. That's the best one I've ever seen.
With Jerry Jeudy, and that's what I was going to say. Like,
they had 4 first-round picks.
2017 team also, the one team that won the title.
Yeah.
They were all young, but they were all
freshmen and sophomores.
Devontae Smith barely played, and he's the guy that caught the game-winning touchdown in overtime of the championship game. 18 with Clemson, you had Justin Ross, you had T. Higgins, you had Hunter Renfrow, which a lot of people, a former walk-on who's now a starter in the National Football League.
Sometimes it just happens, guys.
Right. And but the point is they had multiple NFL players, 17 Bama we talked about. That's the game. I mean, that's where it is right now.
Look at Ohio State's receiver.
Yeah,
core.
Clemson in 2016. I mean, they had Mike Williams. They had multiple guys that eventually became NFL players. And so, at the end of the day, that's just where the game is right now. And in Notre Dame, so it's I understand why we're saying that, and I think that part of the reason we're saying that is because, hey, it's not. I mean, this kid's a big time player. Braylon James is a big time player. It's a big time pickup. But our point is well, so was Tobias Merriweather, and last year's receiver class wasn't good enough because it can't just be one guy.
You got to get 2 receivers at minimum in every class now,
Right.
and that's really kind of low because you're going to play 4
Right.
or about 30 to 40% of your snaps at minimum.
Right.
1 just doesn't cut it.
John A1 asks, of the 23 receiver targets, does James have the highest upside? Look, John, I've said this before. You saw me say this in the message board. The only two players, in my opinion, of the Notre Dame targets, the 2 highest ceilings to me, and I haven't really sat down and really dove into the film enough to have a definitive answer, but it's Braylon James and Tyler Williams, and I've said that for weeks. Those are the 2 highest ceilings to me. And look, Cardinal Tate's grade for me hasn't changed, Brian. He's not coming to Notre Dame. He's still a 5-star player to me. I mean, he's still a big-time player to me. But if we're talking upside, I mean, if everybody reaches their full potential, the 2 best players on the board for Notre Dame right now are Braylon James and Tyler Williams.
Tyler Williams has played receiver for 8 months.
Yeah. But it's about, but so like to me, I get that, but the talent to me has to be there.
Oh, yeah. That's what I mean. Like,
Right.
when he dunks a basketball, he does it out in front of himself, not up.
Right.
Like, you can't teach his leaping ability. He's probably got a 36+ inch vertical, and he's 6'3+.
Right. And he's smooth. There's a play on it. I think it's a kick return where he just kind of like gently hurdles a guy. Like you almost don't even see it at first. And just gets right back to right.
Everything he does is just natural.
Right. And him and him and Braylon are different players, and that's what I
Oh,
like
100%.
about
He's
that's what I like about them as a potential duo is you're not bringing two of the same guy, right? I mean, it's like Jamar Chase and Terrace Edwards had very similar bodies, but they're very different players. And you need some of those complementary skill sets. That's what I like about Braylon James and Tobias Merriweather. Is very similar sizes. Tobias is taller, but similar bodies overall, but different games. There's a lot of carryover, but one guy's better here, the other guy's better there. One guy does more damage over here, the other does more damage over there, and then that's where you got to be. And so I think, but yes, I would say those are my two highest ceiling guys on the board. Brian, would you talked about Tyler, but would you agree that those two guys are the highest ceiling guys, or would you still go with Cardinal in that instance?
Cardinal's his ability to focus mentally already. He's super mature,
right?
And that kind of fits into why his route running and everything is like next. Like as a route runner, I'll be surprised if hardly any of these guys ever catch. He's going to continue to get better,
right?
But athletically, I can't see him being what Tyler is.
Right.
I mean, that at some point you just got to be a ridiculous athlete. And Cardinal is really, really good at that, but he's more skillful in terms of his craft.
Right.
And he's, for people that don't know, and I worked at IMG for a while, the coaching that he's getting right now and all the crap that he's gone through, he was with Midwest Boom and he's been around the right people the whole way, and he's maximized.
Mm-hmm.
If any of the other kids we're talking about had went through the same, oh my goodness. Tyler in particular, if he'd have played with Boom and then been at IMG and stuff and focused on football, he'd be a top 5 player nationally, regardless of position. So, yeah, he'd be the number 1 receiver.
Aaron Bush says, is there a chance that if he commits to Notre Dame, that might solidify Dante, talking about Braylon James, that it might solidify Dante Moore's decision soon? Just got an annual membership. You guys rock. Aaron, thank you so much for signing up to the board. Look, Dante's going to make his decision when he's ready to make his decision. And I don't think that's going to change. I think what it could help do is, so the part I don't necessarily agree with you on, Aaron, is the soon part. I do, however, think it only solidifies it, because look, here's the thing that we're hearing is, and Brian, this is the reason I'm off the Cardinal Tate bandwagon from the standpoint of can he go to Notre Dame is when we talk to people that when Cardinal talks to Notre Dame people, loves Notre Dame. It's all great. Tells Notre Dame coaches he loves them. But you and I have been doing this a long time, Brian. When you start hearing a different story from all the other coaching staffs and recruiting people that aren't associated with Notre Dame, that it's a complete opposite that he's saying about Notre Dame, and that tells you Notre Dame is just a pawn in what he's trying to accomplish, right? I mean, that's just the reality. The difference between him and Dante is, John and I were talking about this today, whenever we reach out to other teams that are recruiting Dante, they all have the same story. We're all chasing Notre Dame. We're all chasing Notre Dame. The only people that think Notre Dame is a legitimate player for Cardinal is Notre Dame. And that usually is a sign. I mean, when we talk to people that are trying to flip Keon Keeley, we're having a hard time getting him off of Notre Dame. That's the reason he hasn't decommitted yet and flipped, because he loves Notre Dame. So there's a difference there. So I think what it can help do is if there's other good players jumping on board, that's only going to solidify Dante's feelings about Notre Dame, right? But it's not going to change his decision-making, because Dante is a mature kid who has a plan. And he's gonna execute that plan. He's gonna take his visits, and he's gonna do it on his time. But I do think what this can do is help Notre Dame standing with him, Brian. That's where I think commitments like Braylon, and then if they're able to get some more offensive players, that's where it's going to impact. But the timing of it won't change. But how Dante feels about Notre Dame could be solidified with moves like this.
Yeah, I don't expect him to make an announcement. If he's taking visits, he's taking visits. It is what it is. He'll probably commit in June or July because he's enjoying the process. I personally don't care, but I also know that a lot of Notre Dame fans are very thin-skinned when it comes to recruiting, and that's just going to be more trouble for you. So.
I don't think it's thin-skinned. It's more of it's conditioned to expect the worst. Which
you
is
can call it whatever you want, but I call it
understandable.
I just, I've been one of those. I was watching the Booker commitment 20 years ago.
Right.
I mean, I've seen it all, brother. So, I interviewed him, and, it's just, sometimes you just, that's why when Braylon pulled out the LSU hat at first there.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
It's not that I'm thin skinned. It's just, we've been down this road.
Oh,
and you don't want to get too excited because you're just waiting on that rug to be, You know, how many times can you be
1000%.
Charlie Brown with the football pulled out from underneath of you that you don't kind of expect it? And so I get why fans are feeling the way they do about Dante, but I would just say, just let it play out, right? Just let it play out. If I hear that there's reason to worry, I promise you I'll let you know there's reason to worry. Michael Johnson says, Tobias Merriweather, Cardinal Tate, Lorenzo Styles, and Braylon James could be a very special thing. I agree, but I don't think one of those guys is going to be part of that group. I would say replace Tate with Colsey, and we could be talking about something. Joshua Sheets says, first time joining the show live. Welcome, Joshua. Love the show and the premium board. Keep up the good work, fellas. Joshua, thank you very, very much for that. David Freeman with a super chat. Thank you, David. So shout out Brian, Vince, and Ryan. Sorry, Brian, you're not part of it. You're Vince for tonight. Just wanted to say appreciate you guys and keep rolling the film. Go Irish. We definitely will. Irish 0687, Brian and Ryan, do you think that he told the staff he'd pull the LSU hat stunt before he is, or is our staff young enough he doesn't worry about their hearts?
That's a great question. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I
mean, what are they going to tell him? I mean, they don't want to mess with it.
I mean, I think if anything, this staff is young enough where they may
they think it's funny.
Yeah, well, not only that, but considering who the hat was, I mean, you're going to run your mouth about us nonstop down there at LSU, and you know we're still on your brain all the time, and you can't keep our names out your mouth. Brian Kelly. Okay, we got a little something for you. It wouldn't shock me. I mean, it may surprise me a little bit if they told him to do that, but it wouldn't shock me. Whereas a couple of years ago would have shocked me. There's no way they would have done that, and I'm okay with it. I mean, there's a right way and a wrong way to do the fake hat thing, in my opinion.
Yeah,
he
didn't
way
do
throw it on the ground.
Right.
That's disrespectful.
That's what Travis Hunter did with the Florida State hat.
Right.
That was just an idiot move.
Right. But that's fun. That's having some fun at your big moment. And he did it in a way that I don't have a problem with it. But I'm not going to lie, because again, I'm conditioned to expect the worst. As soon as I saw that LSU part flip up, I was like, oh my God.
Here we go.
I was like, you got to be kidding me. And to that school especially, give me a freaking break.
Oh, yeah.
So very, very, very good question. I appreciate that. Colin McCann, where does James rank among the receivers? For me, his combination of floor plus ceiling grade is he's number 2 on the board for me. Cardinal Tate's still ranked number 1 right now just because of the combination of floor plus ceiling. Braylon is number 2 for me. Tyler Williams is number 3. Rodney Gallagher is number 4. I don't have Ronan Hannafin on the board because I have him as more of an athlete. But I mean, he's a 4-star top 150 kid to me too. So I mean, those are 5 really good football players that all do very different things.
Hannafin's the one kid I'm not near as high on as you. Maybe it's just because the competition he plays.
Perhaps
it's hard for me to watch that after I went to Florida.
And I get that, but there's a reason a kid from Massachusetts has an offer from Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, LSU, Oklahoma, USC, right?
It's just weird because I'm used to watching a bad team that's 3-7 have a Power 5 kid down here.
Right. But he's really good in my opinion. He's really good. Randy Hernandez with a super chat. Randy, thank you very much for that, buddy. He mentioned the receivers coach has contacted him before Notre Dame hired him. What will the Notre Dame receiving class look like when it's done in 2023?
Oh gosh.
Well, that's a good question, Randy.
That's a big boy question.
I wish I had the answer. I wish I knew the answer, buddy. I really do. You'd be
the oracle if you knew that one.
Yeah, if I could pull that rabbit out of my hat. 2 weeks ago, I said, hey, I think Notre Dame's got a legit shot at Cardinal Tate, and you see how quickly things can change.
That can move back too. This is recruiting.
Perhaps. Especially if he plays this out too long. This is the point I made earlier. If he plays,
somebody's going to get tired of it. They're going to move past.
Well, I don't have those offers on the table anymore, and especially with all this stuff that Notre Dame is doing now with these NIL things kind of coming out for Notre Dame. Look, they're not. The thing is, for a kid like Cardinal is, do you want guaranteed money, or are you willing to kind of bet on yourself, knowing that you maybe could make that kind of money if you went to Notre Dame? Because these new things that they're doing. And I just think some kids are going to go one way, some kids are going the other way. There's going to be enough kids that are going to go one way that's going to work out for Notre Dame. Can they convince Cardinal of that? It's a good question. Do they want to convince Cardinal of that? I think they do. Because I think at the end of the day that for all the games that Cardinal's playing, I do think Cardinal in his heart likes Notre Dame a lot. It's just there's people kind of around him that are letting him know, like, this changes our family situation here, and some
they're looking at it a guarantee,
right?
A guarantee. I get it,
right?
Notre Dame can do it too. It's just,
I think it's short-sighted. but Right. But at the end of the day, so I could see it changing, but as of right now, I'm not holding my breath.
Oh yeah, he's a bonus.
Right. And look, I want people to understand Cardinal Tate's not a bad kid. Like, and there's this thought of, well, because he's got his hand out, he's a bad. Cardinal's a good kid. I mean, he's a good kid. It's just, there's just sometimes, there's kids focus on different criteria for making a decision, but this isn't all of a sudden Cardinal's not a great player, or he's a bad kid, or he's, it's just, I think everything he says about Notre Dame is true. I just think at this point in time, the people around him that are helping shape his decision don't want what Notre Dame has to offer, even if he does. And at some point in time, if Notre Dame is where his heart is, he's going to have to step up and say, hey, look, I appreciate what y'all are saying, but that's where I'm going to go. He doesn't, as of right now, doesn't strike me as that kind of kid. I think he's a kid that's going to be more swayed by what mom and uncle and the other people around him kind of want, and coaches and handlers and all the other kind of stuff. Because that's the difficult thing for his family, because there are a lot of pro Notre Dame people in his family, but they're all in Chicago, and he's down in Bradenton, Florida at IMG Academy. And the people that are lurking around that place.
Yeah, I worked there.
Right, exactly. That's why I say and that's the thing that's making it hard with him, and that's but I just want people to. I understand that people are frustrated that they're not going to get Carnell as of right now, but I don't want this to turn into a, Carnell's not a good kid or not a Notre Dame. If Carnell wanted to be at Notre Dame and decided that's what he wanted to be fine. Smart kid, savvy kid, he'd fit in well. So I want to make sure that we're pumping the brakes a little bit on the negativity towards Carnell, and just say, hey, look, other guys may be better, but that doesn't mean all of a sudden because Carnell doesn't like Notre Dame that he's a bad kid, because he's not. Brian, you've spent time around him.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good kid. He's a good kid. I don't think he's got some of the best people around him with his decision, but he's 17. How many of us would have been able to kind of say no to some of those people when they were 17 years old?
He's quiet. He doesn't say boo unless you walk up to him. He's just that guy.
Yeah, he's very vocal with this, right? The social media stuff, right? That's
and that's part. Question for you. Speaking of Tate, if they don't get him and they want to take that fourth or fifth receiver, do you think they're really open to looking at guys they see this summer and this fall, or do you think Stucky is going to? Okay, this is my freaking list, man.
No.
The last staff was the former, and it drove me bananas.
No, I think they're open to that. I think the thing with some of these guys, Brian, is I think this staff understands that we've got to make sure we're committing our resources in the right directions. And I think that's some of the hesitation with Tyler Williams, because if a kid doesn't return calls and doesn't engage with you, and he's from Lakeland High School, what are you supposed to think other than this kid doesn't have a lot of interest in us?
That's what he does with everybody.
Right. But he went out and visited Stanford. Right. Yep. But he won't go to South Bend. So, I think they're more willing to move off of a kid, no matter how much they like him, because they understand we only have a certain number of resources. But I also think that if a kid pops up, they'll jump on him. We've seen that. Look, like offensive line is a perfect example. Like when Coach Easton got hired in January, it was like, here's our board. Let's get on the road, because we only have a week on the road, a week and a half, 2 weeks on the road. Let's get out and see the kids that we know now. They went and saw Okanlola. They saw Monroe Freeling. They saw Absher. They saw Chagusa, guys that are on the board, Austin Saravel. Then when he got back from that, he sat down and said, okay, now let me look at – and that's how they got on Sam Pendleton, because he wasn't a kid that the previous staff had offered. After Harry kind of worked through the already on the board, okay, what else is out there? That's what they offered Elijah Page. That's why he went after Sam Pendleton, because it was like, okay, I got the board that I inherited. There's some kids I love from that board. We'll keep recruiting, but let's find some other kids. And so they've shown that willingness to do that. It's just right now they're still in on a lot of their top guys. They're still in on Jaden Greathouse. They're still in on Rodney Gallagher. Still in on Ronan Hannafin. They're still in, obviously, on Braylon James. But they're from what my conversation have been, they're more than willing to expand the board. So if, let's just say, for example, Tyler Williams or his mother reached out to Notre Dame and said, hey, you know what? Yeah, we have interest, and let's figure something out, that I think Notre Dame would go full steam ahead on him. So I think that's really the thing that's how the best way I would describe it, Ryan. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I have gathered from the staff so far.
All right. Well, I got to run. I got my own podcast to knock out.
Sounds
but,
good.
This was fun, man. Hopefully I get to come on and talk about some other. Do they have anybody else coming up decision. Why I can't think of anybody. But
Well, Sam Pendleton's making a decision on Monday. It's going to be between Notre Dame, Florida, Michigan, and NC State. That's the offensive lineman I was just talking about. So he announced this
did not
morning.
know that.
Yeah,
I
because
didn't
you
know that.
were traveling today. So he announced this morning that he was going to have a commitment on Monday. And I would just tell people to pay attention this weekend to other things is all I would say to people, Brian. And I'll give you a shout later and
well, that's important. All right. Well, thank you very much, man. You all have a great night. Appreciate it, man.
I'm going to get to some more questions here before we get out of here because we do still have some more questions. I want to make sure we get everybody here. Marky Stewart, my guy Mark. Thank you, Mark, for being a part of the chat. I haven't seen you in a while, but it's good that you're here, and thank you for the super chat. Has Cardinal Tate officially eliminated Notre Dame? Has Notre Dame stopped recruiting Tate? Neither. Notre Dame is still recruiting Cardinal Tate as far as I know, and Cardinal Tate has not eliminated Notre Dame. This is more an Irish breakdown. We've heard enough smoke to realize that right now Notre Dame is not a factor, no matter how much they're trying, but they're still recruiting him from what I understand. They still like him. They still think he's a fit. They still think he's a good kid. They understand what they're up against. But my understanding is that they are still on him at this point in time. Terry Howie with a great observation. He said Marcus Freeman's genuine honesty and caring about recruits is having a major impact on recruits and their parents. And I think that's a big thing when you talk to Braylon's dad and you listen to Braylon talk tonight. I mean, he said, what was the pitch, right? That was the question. Like, what were they selling? And his thing is like, they weren't selling anything other than just genuine relationship. And I think that's a really important thing. I think that's a very important piece of this whole recruiting process. Notre Dame has to do it differently. Again, is it harder to recruit in Notre Dame? Sure. Does that mean you can't have top 3 to 5 classes every year? No, it doesn't mean that. You just have to find the right niche to present yourself as something different. And I think this staff has done that and partly because it is, and I think you said it, Harry, it's genuine. I think that's just who Marcus is. That's who the coaches he's hired are. I mean, Chancey Stucky doesn't have to, hey, let's sell the relationship angle. That's just who he is. I mean, that's part of what he values. And I think that's partly why Marcus Freeman hired the staff that he hired, was because he wanted people that were going to, that's just who they were. And I think that was important to him. So, and, we'll kind of see how that plays out from here on out. Got another comment and from Colin McCann. He says, watching some of Braylon's film, he can definitely navigate an open field, some real yak potential. I agree. That's the one thing that's unique about him and Tobias Merriweather, but especially Braylon, is they do have some after the catch stuff, which a lot of the bigger guys Notre Dame has had recently haven't really had. Miles Boykin wasn't doing anything after the catch. Chase could a little bit, but it was more, he could do some things, but not quite like these two kids, in my opinion. Irishman 7114 asks, which of these do you think is closest to committing? Hannafin, Jason Moore, Pendleton, Lamar, or Houston? I would say the closest. I would expect of that group, obviously Pendleton. I mean, that's cheating because he announced today he's going to be doing it on Monday. I would say probably Pendleton and Jaden Lamar are the two kids that are closest to making a decision of that group. I could see Devin Houston maybe doing something in May. I could maybe see Jason Moore doing something in May. I could see maybe Ronan Hannafin doing something in May, but I think right now he would like to take visits. But yeah, I think of the guys that you mentioned, I absolutely believe that Pendleton and Lamar are probably the two best bets for as far as from a timing standpoint. All right, let me get through here to see if there's any more super chats that I might have missed. I hope I didn't miss anybody's super chats, but I just want to make sure I get those before we shut this bad boy down. I appreciate everybody being a part of this tonight. Hey, before you go and before we wrap up, and again, we're not done just yet, I want you all to make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We have been kind of demonetized, I said, because of that song that was playing in the tweet. So I kind of had a feeling that was happening. It is what it is. But so that's why I really appreciate the super chats that came along today very, very much. But I don't even care. This has been a fun show and a great crowd tonight. So appreciate everybody being a part of it. We'll be back tomorrow. And just kind of be rocking and rolling. So we'll talk some more team stuff tomorrow. Ryan is going to be traveling tomorrow, and so he will not be able to. We probably not do the O-line show tomorrow, but we're going to try to get that done here pretty soon as well. But that's going to be it for now, everybody. I appreciate everybody being a part of the show tonight. It's a lot of fun, a lot of great people, a lot of first-time people. As my guy May say, Kay says, join the message board, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share the podcast, give a 5-star review, troll LSU, and go Irish. So, everybody, appreciate y'all very much for being part of the show. This was a lot of fun. I want to see everybody be back next time. As you all know, we'll be back tomorrow, 12:30 Eastern time in the afternoon. Appreciate y'all. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you again very, very soon. Thank you so much for joining the Irish Breakdown Podcast.